like definitely no different listener right now as for like the episode having like the name six legs. Like I'm thinking definitely like it would be like on the connected to like the nature of like the second studio in like the related of studio because like I'm definitely still remember that it might have been definitely because like in how was like basically like some man was like witnessing and seeing from his like Rosie frontman played like he was like actually witnessing like the performance of like the first Squid Game while like the first Squid Game was going on. And I'm bring like that very same info to like basically right now. So as like in the disguise as like the number one Squid Game player. And those ones might have been actually due to like info being extremely possibly disappointed at like the success that like Sandron had in like the first like in like Squid Game and related to Squid Game with like Sandron succeeding in like basically saving all those like great number of lives of specters in candidate only unlike the like the Trinity Stadium that like in like the Trinity Sports against only due to like Sanjay efforts like basically like only since only about like 90 something players were like got eliminated. That might have been totally contrary to that in those like expectations. Like info might have been totally for constantly thinking that even with like Sanjay like attempt to that help them still even way more than that number might get eliminated in like the first video might have been what if I might have been like not expecting or something like expecting stuff in the brain. So like I'm going like to totally get rid of that Sandro and to totally ensure that Sandro's like attempt to like save all this like the candidate consistently fails to ensure that that would be like the reason for like this current schedule is like the same for especially members of Jan. I'm also putting like the possibly would be more than that alone into to that basically enforce taking the decision right now to that basically show up and display let the number one student candidate. The ultimate observation and that more reason would be maybe due to that like in that childhood experience when back when Sanjay was that a child like in whom might have definitely been like Sanjay's like childhood friend that like Sanjay along with like Song who had played both like chat games and photos of games with definitely another place. And back then like I'm thinking it might have been info that might have been always losing to like the team of like Sang Gion and Sang Yu. It's definitely another player. So like info might have had that position was meant. And I was thinking about the position that Ilnam would definitely be info's father. And Sang father would be like the identical twin brother of like Williams, who would be like the first who would be like actually the person that might have had like the dementia issues, definitely with the dementia. Williams might have definitely not had like dementia issues and like the in like the Indian civilians like the old man with like dementia who played like the first three civilians with like Sanjon was like Sanjon's father. It's definitely my was very much why he like the fourth civilian like Ilham might have only taken his life, that old man with dementia his life and with like I think look identical like Ilham might have only that we input through it took on put on his like civilian uniform and might have been in that disguise might have to experience like this game while and also to ensure that he doesn't die in that game. He might have sure he might have set up like the form to game to lead into master game and he might have that way infiltrated into them into the this two games and basically it might have played like the first game and might have been what might have happened if definitely it might have the reimbursement. So one of the reimbursements were like in the reimbursement and also different like in the case of like the childhood of that in Nam as well as like the twin brother of like identical twin brother of Ilnam who would be like Sandra's sort of like in their childhood as well like empathy it might have been like the same similar kind of like a scenario like how like during like the childhood of like Sangyon and like they might have always played all these like childhood good games and that like it might have been always like info would be like the son of Ilham that Ilham that might have always played to like Sangyon and that was what like might have been like the similar situation was that the childhood of that Ilham and the Sanjay's father like it might have been Ilham that might have been always losing to like Sanjay's father Stephanie also like a person developed so like I'm feeling like after like the 2015 experience in which like Info had won like the really big experience which might have been solely due to like Ilham totally like stealthily helping in an unfair manner like helping Info out and might have given also some close to that Info that are stealth for Info to like keep succeeding and and I was going to slightly through such a manner that Info might have even won like the 25th game. And I'm looking after info winning like the 15th game might have been when that info might have even found out the truth that actually Innam is in fact like info's father. It might be after like info winning like the 25th game game that like Innam might have finally confirmed that info and all that might have happened. It's definitely not the ambition. So I'm looking for instance like Innam might have revealed to that info about like Innam's childhood and about like Sangyong's father as well as like Sangyong and all that. It's definitely my book. So like since then I'm looking like in info might have had this like his like memories are written about like his like childhood experience that he had with like Sangyong or like he had all this knowledge and everything. So like I'm doing since like recently basically before entering into like the 2024 experience like Sangyong in that limousine car like basically had told info how like basically Sangyong knew or like Sangyong knew that basically roughly Ilnam right before his death had realized that like in that game between like Sangyong and Ilnam connecting to that homeless person that Ilnam had lost that game that Ilnam right before his death had realized that he had lost to like Sangyong. Basically Sangyong even saying this as well to info might have also deep down triggered that or that dislike and jealousy that like info deep down might have had like that feeling of inferiority complex as well that info might have deep down had towards like Sangyong and Sangon family that might have also been like gotten triggered up well at that point, especially my opinion. So like I'm looking like people like Sangu, Sangyeon, as well as like the old man with the Japanese like Sangon or like them all getting like lured into and getting trapped in like the 2020 Squid Games might have been solely according to like the like might have been solely according to like the decision of like Innam alone to which like info might have been listening to is definitely one of the great numbers. Like in like the case of like between you can sports game like I'm definitely that definitely there might have been that right now there will be that memories within that whole it's like kind of inferiority complex kind of like a memory like laying dormant within like info and that and connecting to like Sanjo that might have for games back and runs back into like info with that recent incident when in that limousine Sanjo had told info that basically that Sanjo had defeated info father might have been what might have happened if the new one was famous. So definitely this might also be like a major crucial factor in right now like info basically deciding to like right now disguise and show up as like the number one player Squid candidate when like the current 24 games to like actually compete with like Sanjo like basically it wouldn't just be about like info wanting to like destroy ensure that San each and every single plan of like Sanjo to like destroy all the to save all this like great number of candidates fails, but to also to like get that satisfactory kind of like a fulfilling feeling in that deep right now deep down within info. It's like info will be the and also for info it could be also in a way as if to like get revenge for against like Sanjon for like defeating both Ilnap as well as like info always defeating info as well during like the childhood, especially that the possibility that I'm looking for. So like it would be like an extremely personal thing for like info to that basically right now play this Squid Game along in that disguise like to play this Squid Game currently in the Squid Game again along with like Sanjon against like Sanjon and to like perform even better than Sanjon. It's definitely also like about that I'm looking for and other talking about the impression but like first of all the reason I'm looking for like even in whole like even in like the 2024 games might be like totally planning on cheating his way into like surpassing and performing better than Sanjon and that way like I'm looking like info to be like going to that extent to like basically for might have already planned to like basically definitely cheat in like the games against like Sanjo. And even then like Info might have the only thing that Info might want would be to like not only destroy all of Sanjo's plan but to like to make himself to try to like trick himself into like making himself feel as if like he's a better game player than Sanjo. It's definitely my super impression. So this might be like the reason for like Amber's so like my was the impression that like so like the six like the credit card name six like would be like the name would be connected to like the nature of like the second studio. So like I'm looking right now like the second though the first game was like similar of like a red light green light into the was like similar to like the Squid Game of like first Squid Game of like green that I'm preferring like from like the second Squid Game on from like like the second Squid Game on like each of like Squid Games will be totally different to the Squid Game that Sanjay had played in that 2020 is definitely my favorite, and that will be all suited according to like the comfort of like info is definitely my favorite, and so that like info would get the upper edge and like an advantage in that game. Like in such a manner, like those games will be set up, and on top of that, like I'm like info definitely would be getting close even beforehand as to that which among those remaining five games like would you get the next game as well. So definitely my that way I'm to different like info's journey right now in like 24 games like info's journey. Playing like the remaining five games I'm also playing would be through that of like an extremely cheating manner. It's definitely cheating and unfair manner. That's how like info would be like playing, but with that absolute self, would be how like in how we playing like the remaining five of like the 2024 Indians is like the scenario that I'm looking for him up today. Like the name of the three interesting right now that's for like in one of them like the token of like the eliminate players like having that cross return drawn on in exactly like during like the 2020 season. Like I'm looking like in the 2024 game right now this cross on like the token would be totally left and put for specifically in-ho, definitely my preference. So like for in-ho to like follow those Stygian workers and in-ho right now would be like in the guys of like a Stygian workers, definitely my preference. Because like I'm still in my preference that like in-ho's like intent would be to like cheat his way into like progressing through like uh, progressing through like the content for good games while constantly destroying each and every single one of like Sanjon's plans that have good stealth to destroy each and every single one of like Sanjon's plans to like save all this like Sugi candidates and basically by also trying to like deep down that like extreme like frustration that like info might have towards like Sanjon from like the possibility of like Sanjon most likely having like during childhood played like the childhood games like it might have always defeated it also that frustration might be present within it how to like also like get that satisfaction of that frustration by defeating even if it's through cheating for like info to like defeat Sanjon as well through like the game and info would have set up like the games in like the 20 and we're totally planning on like to ensuring to like eliminate and get rid of like Sangyeon for once and for good before like Sangyeon even makes it to like the final school to like the fifth floor like final school games. It's definitely my dream so like Info might totally have this plan uh planned out ahead. It's definitely my friend. So like that way right now currently in like the percent like Info would be in like the disguise of like the skill game worker uniform definitely my preference. So like that way like I'm looking and so like I'm looking like the skill game worker who would have thrown that like cross mark onto one of like the topics might have been like one of like the most trusted friend of close friends of like info definitely my preference. Definitely I'm preferring like info will be having like a bunch of close trusted friends which like in info from his point of view would be like only trusting definitely my preference. And definitely preferring things like in like the 24 games, like there are like a hierarchy even above like the red uniform school game workers. Like since like there are I think like there was like two school game workers that were shown wearing like black uniform, like similar to that of like the frontman. I was going those two school game workers which like the black uniform would be like the most close, closest of like trusted friends of like people. So that might be the reason for like them getting such a top them being given such a top the like most superior position in as like as the game of the right hand of like the front match. It definitely might be the case of definitely not the ranges. So like I'm looking at what Info might have done. Like again like I'm looking at once like Info might have like initially I'm looking according to like Info's plans to like Info might have definitely totally fixed in his mind to like only cheat this way in that the teleports to give like to do all sorts of cheating to like ensure that Sangyeon all of Sangyon's plans gets destroyed, constantly destroyed as well. Sangyeon get eliminated, especially with the rest. So like to make it happen, like everything what Info might have initially planned might have been like Info like the film with redemption right now is that basically like the first like red light green light to game in 2024 games like I'm like the number one specific candidate was like the uniform of that number one number like and the like that's the game candidate might have definitely been a close friend of Info who might who according to like in who might have entered as like a in the disguise of like a civilian candidate in like the number one uniform, solely with like the task to like specifically target Sangyeon and like spy on Sangyeon and like basically to like basically to carefully with that approach stealth like spy on Sangyeon and everything. It's definitely my potential on each move that Sangyeon will be making and to destroy to ensure that destroy all that move. So like I'm just like that civilian candidate is like the uh, uh number one uniform number. Like he might have been like only been trained in like the six games in like 2024. Definitely even before like the 2024 games even began definitely my preparation. So his like so definitely like the reason behind like info placing him might have been due to like for info to like ensure that like Sangon eventually gets not only that like Sangon eventually gets eliminated through him as well as like each and every single one of Sangon's plans get destroyed through him. That number one player who will be like spy of info is definitely my very ambition. So I was remembering as for like what might have happened would be like seeing like totally it would be like sitting to members that like Team might have only expected like for like a great number of like civilian candidates to get eliminated in like the like green light to get even with like Sangyeon, even if like Sangyeon tries to help them, but like I'm just trying Sangyeon succeeding in like helping them Sangyeon's like attempt to like help them succeeding to like the great extent to like the point of like very little about only 90 something like screen candidates that getting eliminated and that might have only triggered info to the extreme that I'm like info might have decided to like basically himself for himself to like compete against like Sanjeon in like the 24 games and for himself to like ensure that ensure the elimination of like Sanjeon and like, the destruction of each of the Sanjeon's plan might have been like final decision that info might have came to by the time like the 2024 first red light getting like to game mode like almost about to be over. Definitely not doing. So like I'm looking at that point, like I'm looking at what might have happened would be like even before like info had sent most likely might have sent us like spike, which would be like a game candidate like the number one uniform to even play like the red light green light game. Like even before that, like info might have given him some sort of like a beeper or like a vibrating kind of like a device for info to be able to communicate with him. Definitely memorable. It would be most likely some sort of like a device which would be through which like messages alone could be sent to the new memorable. So and those are like that device might have been in like the pocket of like the civilian candidate with like the number one just number during like the red light green light to game step news. So like I was saying like the moment like the red light green light to game was over like I'm looking like and I'm definitely right now my book membership like the number one civilian candidate who might be working for in like he might have definitely succeed that he might have been already prepared and trained for like the red light green light to game. So like I'm looking like he might have definitely succeeded and survived like the red light green light game might have been working hard. So like as soon as that game was over, like I was like Info might have select the button and I was on that paper and but most likely might have vibrated. So like I'm instantly he might have checked like that paper and I'm also bring like or like I'm also bring like info and him might have only pre-planned before like the 2031st games began that basically like if like that paper or that device vibrates then by returning back to like the studio candidate or after like playing like the first two games that he would have to like stealthily like enter into like a specific room because like I'm wondering in that room filled with like stairs like in that huge room kind of like area before like that place before like entering into like a studio man like that place where like the studio candidates pass through after like each studio and like everything in that area I'm wondering that might have been like a stealthy or prepared for him and like might have been totally like the method or like info and like good friend might have already discussed even beforehand that basically if like that beeper vibrates then that means that info himself want to like see him so like I'm looking while then back he should like stealthily enter into that room so like I'm looking like that might have been so like exactly like how like that in like the 2020 games like how like the local civilian candidates had stealthily while returning from like games over had basically stealthily uh, like separated himself like from like the remaining Indian candidates with that absolute stealth and everything. and got that uncut flow and everything. And those are like long similar line like people they might have already clamped. Definitely my reverse. So like I'm thinking it might have been precisely after like the red light, green lights to game was over like I was like it's like keeper kind of like a device might have totally vibrated. So like he might have while returning back from like the red light, green lights to game like I was like he might have totally entered into this like room in that there in that user room area where it's like filled with definitely my friend. While there were the great number of Indian candidates running back, he might have still the like separated himself from them and might have entered into the room. And they are like I'm like info might have been present and then they would like what info might have done might have been like info might have totally told him to like give this like Indian candidate uniform to like info. So like that way like info might have quickly put on like the green Indian candidate uniform and like quickly like return back to that their room where like all the great number of Indian candidates who are continuously on their way to like to get them back to like the Indian candidate. So like info might have steadily stepped in back to into like the group might have been what might have happened is definitely not very much. That was very much that maybe like from that room like that precise student candidate with like the number one uniform who had played like the red light during that period might have been like that at the close friend of info. Might have from that room might have put on info might have given his like uniform of like the front man to him because info would trust him to that extent is that what might have happened is definitely been good. But like info might have given his like front man uniform to him while information told him to like give his like senior candidate one performance. That way, like the front man right now, like the person would be like that senior candidate who played with the like green light game, like the number one just number. It's the new number playing. So like I'm just like after like info, basically that way info might have run back to like the senior candidate. So, and like done all the majority voting and after that like I'm just like what info might have done might have been like info might have wanted to like ensure that like basically the upcoming second studio as to what exactly like the upcoming second studio is like I'm looking like info might also only want to ensure that like it's like the very same studio that info is totally hoping for. But like I'm looking definitely to have a clarity on that, like I'm looking what info might have done might have been like after like showing up to like studio candidate form that as as like the number one studio candidate and after like that whole majority voting and everything like I'm looking like what info might have done might have been like info might have then might have told like the school games workers that like he needs to that use the restroom might have been what might have happened. So like I'm looking like among like the school game workers like standing right outside like the right outside like the school game candidate room guarding like the school game candidate room that I'm looking like most likely one of like the school game worker or both of those school game workers in like the red uniform might be like also people who knows of like in-house plan and like who would be like totally is definitely member payments. So like I'm looking like they might those two or one billion of the flat will be like standing on the door outside guarding like the student candidate room numbers. I think they would be like people who would be like close friends to like info as well, and they would be knowing info who info is and like, definitely member payments. So like I'm looking like the name of like info wanting to like use the restroom like they might have only exported info. I'm looking like one of the those game workers might have only exported info to like the group. And I'm looking like they are like I'm looking like that way like I'm looking like for info it might have been such a high priority that like the majority of like the game workers doesn't find out that like info is like cheating and that like info is not an active second candidate and all that. For the majority of the CDM workers present there in like the building as well as the majority of the CDM workers even doing like the monitoring as well. For none of them to like find out about like info doing all this cheating and everything like would be of such a great high priority for info. Even while info is like currently like the person running like the game and that was like the process of reason would be due to like info like extreme insecurity because of like and due to like info taking like the good game like so extremely even games so extremely seriously like for in I'm like in life like game would be having such a huge priority and like trying to ensure that the game is played like the rules of the game that need to be played in a fair manner and all that that might have totally affected info so much due to there was like that might have all happened after like info spending time with like Ilnam after like the 2015 game is definitely Ilnam might have only brainwashed info to like the point of like turning info to like someone like Ilnam who might have been crazy to think that life is like all about like games and everything about like playing games in a fair manner and all. So like I'm looking right now since like in bit only cheating, like I'm looking like for in bit only insecure about like anyone finding out about it. So like info might have only like it would be only like the very close a bunch of very close friends of info alone who would be like working as like the school game workers alone that would be like knowing about like all this like stealthy cheating that like info would be doing, especially member creation. But like I was trying like to ensure that like majority of like school game workers doesn't find out that info is like cheating. Uh, and like the majority of the civilian workers will be having absolutely no idea who Inho is. So like I'm doing so because of this reason will be the reason of like that absolute death. So like I'm doing like what Info might have done might have been like the name of like Info as like the number one in candidate like using like the restroom like I'm like Info might have shortly got on like the studio worker standing right outside the door of like the studio candidate to like escort Info to like the restroom and they are like I'm doing Info might have only changed like his like studio candidate uniform at that point uh, not exchange, but like inform might have at that point like change his like student candidate uniform with like the uniform of that student worker who might be like a close friend of like in-house definitely member profession. Like I'm like info might have told that student worker to like basically take in-house like uniform and basically like, there will be like a stealthy secret door uh, which won't be easily able to which like none of the civilian candidates would be knowing that even though the civilian candidates other civilian candidates would be using the restroom like I'm saying there will be a secret door in like the restroom so like which would be totally meant for it might have been created by info for all these plans and everything is definitely so like they are like I'm thinking right now like the studium worker, the actual studium worker will be hiding there while info with like info like outfit costume like your candidate costume of like number one. While info right now would have put on like the studium worker red uniform and might have like left from that restroom and might have like straight away showed up to that locations where like right now all the eliminated that bodies of all the eliminated game candidates of like the red light green light game is being like taken to that fumigated and everything. So like I'm wondering this might be the reason for like right now and I'm wondering definitely there as well and I'm wondering like one of like the Squid Game workers like there will be one Squid Game worker that will be like close friend to like info and will be knowing who info is. It's also the new member rating. Like the red Australian uniform is definitely member rated. And it might be him that might have put that cross onto like that profit specifically meant for info. Especially because like they might have still communicated with that actress that when info in like the disguise of like the red uniform wearing next to game worker like might have showed up there like he might have totally constantly with like this like hand signs might have and then that actress that might have communicated and found that's the game of the soul. Like I was like at that point, like he might have told info, he might have put this like cross in front of like in that coffin in front of like info and might have that way given like the cue to like info to like follow him. So like I'm looking right now, info I'm looking like in the guys of like the studio worker I'm looking would be following him and like I'm looking they would be like entering like a secret room. And I'm looking there like I'm looking that studio worker totally revealing to like info as to like what exactly, which exactly like the second skill game is going to be, and how maybe even how exactly that, and like definitely giving all the clues and development, like even maybe giving like steadily giving like even items that like would like allow info to and to greatly ensure that to giving like tiny items to like info, which like info will be able to like use to like feed this way into like increasing the possibility of like winning like that second skill game. It's the limit of the that to pass all these things and information to like info would be like the precise reason for like I'm putting like that according to like info plans and like basically that crop would be right now crop onto like that pocket. It's definitely my perception. So like this is what I'm preferring for eventually to like happen. It's definitely my perception. So like the major percent right now and so like info right now putting on is like absolute pay and asking Sanjo and has like a speaking candidate thinking to be a being candidate and asking Sanjo and like Sanjo knows what like the next game is like definitely protect like this would be more like info like practical business strict plan to like basically to have like those youth or Indian candidates like basically the majority of them to like totally majority of like possible for all of them to like totally look their trust on Sanjo to like achieve that would be what like the current thing that In-ho is doing right now with this whole interaction in front of like other with like San John's definitely not the relation because like I'm definitely In-ho might have totally as part of it like practical realistic plan like might have already like set up and given the orders to have like the next good game not be Dalgona. It's definitely not the relation. That way to like make San John like by this interaction like with like In-ho and also San John in front of like all the remaining Squid Game candidates to make San John say that like the second Squid Game is Dalgona. So that like basically definitely that way once like the second Squid Game definitely everything it definitely won't be Dalgona. So like at that point for all of them to like lose their trust on San John and to for all of them to like only think that like San John is like a fake and basically definitely I'm bring at that point like I'm definitely for the second Squid Game not being Dalgona and at that point I'm definitely putting like info at that point would be putting on that absolute fake act and like shouting out in an angry manner towards like Sanjon and I was like in both only turning things around as if like basically to make Sanjon look back in front of all of them as if like Sanjon is like someone who basically totally to frame Sanjon to like making Sanjon seem like this person who makes money by like entering into like this to game each year and basically like after like the first red light, green light, and every year like the first good game would be a red light, green light good game. So like that would be like the only game that Sanjon might have never played in this life and that this good game. So like support how Sanjon is like the like fake person who makes money by like playing like the red light, green light good game, the only good game that he would be so that time basically after like winning like the red light, green light good game, Sanjon will be pressurizing every want like the majority of Brazilian candidates each year to like basically to like to leave through like the majority voting and that way so that like Sanjon and that way like I'm the different like actually import that point telling that basically each year like from like the beginning like it might have been like basically that way like basically each year when Sanjon leaves through like the majority voting Sanjon tricking everyone and like leaving and that way like Sanjon getting that share of like that reward money that will be present after like the first game would be over and basically Sanjon leaving with that reward money and returning that like, the next year into the next game and doing the same thing and that way like Sanjon is like someone who might not even have any depth unlike all the remaining Squid Game candidates like who are like totally desperate and such a critical situation Sanjon would be someone who wouldn't have any depth and like Sanjon would be like someone who would be like seeing the Squid Game like as like a way to like make uh, to use like the game for its like advantage by tricking all the others and basically to make money by basically entering only into like the first game and like pressurizing everyone to like leave up for like the first game and this might have been what like Sanjon might have been doing the entire time. So like definitely this might be the reason for like Sanjon being so good at like the like green lights good game and Sanjon getting like the second good game even wrong as like Dalvin and like Sanjon. So there's a reason for like Sanjon being so disappointed that the majority voting this year alone like didn't end up in like Sanjon's favor. So there's a reason for like Sanjon being such greatest step. So like Sanjon was trying to trick all of like the remaining Syrian candidates this entire time into like leaving, but like Sangyong's like plan had backfired with like when eventually like the majority voting result ended up with like them continuing on into like the second Squid Game. So like Sangyong might have been already putting on that absolute fake act and trying to might have taken that wild guess as if it's about the of like it being like diagonal and like in actuality Sangyong has absolutely no idea what like the next game is. And basically at that point, this like what I'm referring definitely that info would be saying most likely right once like the second full game would be prepared or like I'm referring once like the second full game would be over. It's like the scenario that I'm referring in front of all the remaining city candidates like the scenario that I'm referring. So like I'm referring like at that point like Sanjon desperately trying to win back his trust and Sanjon telling them like all the details as to like each of like the five full games that Sanjon had played in like 2020 and basically like how extremely dangerous and difficult it was and everything like and how much all that money that Sanjay had won and everything like Sanjay saying all the sense trying to win back the trust of like the game candidates is like the really trying to like win back the trust of like, the game candidates like the scenario that I'm looking and so that during that time like I was going Sanjay mentioning out like each of like the next good game after like the related in that season that Sanjay has played in like 2020 like after that gonna like basically the tug of war and they the Marcus game and basically the Amara Bridge and like class Bridge game and all that. Alexander mentioning each and every single one of the next two games in front of all the two game candidates. And like I'm looking like the scenario that I'm looking is definitely for like only like the red light green light Squid Game add-on being like the very same as like the 2020 game in 2024 in the game I'm looking at. And definitely still thinking about the everything that like the remaining five Squid Games in like the 2024 Squid Game will be all different Squid Games when compared to like the Squid Games in like 2020 like the scenario that I'm looking at. And by the premise. So like that way, like what in whole we're right now trying to achieve would be like that way to like have like the uh, entirety of like the Stygian candidates to lose like Sanjion's trust. That way could have destroyed Sanjion's plan, and that way like the entire remain Stygian candidates not listening to like Sanjion like for them or like the that way to like increase like the like elimination the number of Stygian candidates that will be getting eliminated in like each round so that like Sanjion won't be able to like save exactly like how Sanjion had saved in like those great number of swinging candidates in like the first red light green light game like that not being possible for Sanjon in like the remaining experience solely due to that through impose like manipulation like basically the swinging candidates not believing in Sanjon and not listening into that Sanjon so that like a great number of weeks to get candidates would be getting eliminated so that like basically by the time the VIPs would be arriving for like the Squid Game, the 10th Squid Game, like the Squid Game candidates that would be remaining for like the Squid Game that would be all like seriously good and strong Squid Game candidates so that like basically like info would be able to like give that much of like an entertainment Squid Game experience for like the VIPs. This would be what like info the planning supplement the premise. And on top of that, like I'm also working definitely info would be deep down having that the trap to like settle this for and get revenge on Sanjon and basically for to info to like defeat Sanjon at least in a single good game and that way to get that satisfactory feeling of being able to like defeat Sanjon in like a good game at least for once in his life, which like info might have never been able to endure his like childhood while he might have played like the childhood games with like Sanjon and on top of that to also to ensure that like Sanjon gets eliminated through like the 2024 to get that way to like basically since like Sanjon will be such a nuisance to like info and like a trouble for info with like Sanjon using all of it like reward money to like basically like capture like the people behind like this film and everything and put them into like studio. Sanjon will be right now such seen as like such a nuisance to like info to like to get rid of that nuisance as well through like the 2024 game to like ensure this happens would be what like info right now attempting so that like from the 2025 studio like regardless of like who are wins like the 2024 Julian like from like the 2025 Julian if John gets eliminated and then Info will be like freely able to like continue hosting like the Squid Games as like so that like the Squid Games could be like continue could be conducted from 2025 to like the remaining future years without any difficulties or obstruction if like John is like eliminated would be also like Info's plan and made of reimbursement right now. So that definitely the we have question right now as for like the more likely possibility that I'm developing is definitely that for like if you have to think about observation that like the second skill game I'm definitely starting while Rango has revealed that basically it's like Falcon and the friend like definitely in like the first video that the second skill game definitely won't be Falcon. Definitely it's an area that I'm looking and I'm also right now I'm also putting that dealing more with the possibility that like basically then at that point I'm also putting that info to just keep up with like have good face acting and basically think that as it's like basically I'm talking about among like the very minority among like the Sunni candidates who would be still trusting Sanjon even after like the second Squid game would be revealed to be not be Sanjon like the scenario that I'm looking. So like I'm looking like info still like putting on that fake and like privately in front of like Sanjon alone. While in like the while like the majority of the Syrian candidates won't be like in the presence of Sanjon like I was like it would be in that such situations alone, like I'm looking like in totally showing that putting on a fake actors like he still hopes that as we trust in like Sanjon words and everything converts that what playing like game in like 2020 and winning in 2020 and all that. It's definitely the praise and I'm like trying like solely that will be all part of like Info's like realistic plan because like I'm looking definitely for Info like I'm looking rather than like pouring on the super like Info we're only betting on like definitely like the moment like the second shoot game would be like result and it won't be Falcon at that point and like without even Info having to do anything at all like this straight away like the majority of like the shoot game candidates totally losing that trust that they would be currently having on John would be something that involves so like making new member payments. So like I was saying like Info's plan would be to like not change their mindset, but instead like in their absence for In-ho to like totally approach Sang-yeon and basically Sang-yeon and to like totally put on a fake put on that fake act privately in front of Sang-yeon as if like In-ho still trusts Sang-yeon's words and all that, and that would be like In-ho's plan to like basically stealthily that way In-ho's that through In-ho's disguise as one of the Muslim candidates to like always say the right side like Sang-yeon so that like In-ho would be well enough fully could keep up to date up to like each and every single move that like Sang-yeon would be like making to still get back the prospect of the remaining Syrian candidate. Definitely no premise and save the remaining Syrian candidate in each Syrian that like happened after that. My work very so like we always be aware and up to date about like each and every single plans that Sanjon will be making even after that. Like and definitely was only expecting that like in what way that after like having no Sanjon since like the Indian Syrian like since like after even after like becoming like the winner and earning on that money, the fact that Sanjon had basically had formed of that two search party and spent so much money to like capture the people behind like game and put an end to like the game for like the past 3 or 4 years. Like the backside like Sangon in such an extremely dedicated man of that was like is like determined to like end the student game. Especially because of In-ho knowing this like and In-ho be like actually certain that like even if like the majority of like the Syrian candidates like after like the second 2 years would be definitely something would be a big release to be not be Balgona. Like even after that at that point actually the majority of the Syrian candidates will be losing that was from Sangwan. Even then at that point as well like Sangwan will be trying in that all sorts of different strategical ways to like earn back and win back all of that trust. So like by always staying right beside Sangwan with that approach that Info would be able to like keep up to date with like each and every single strategy that like Sangwan would be planning to like earn back their trust so that like Info would be able to like steadily for each and every one of those strategies Sangwan. And this would be like most likely Info's like ultimate strategical plan. It's definitely my very impression. So definitely because of this reason I'm looking for referring like even after like definitely referring like second Julian definitely referring won't be like Balgona. Even at that point I'm looking for like Info would be still sticking to Sangyon's team and would be still sticking to Sangyon's team and still would be always right beside Sangyon. It's definitely like the scenario that I'm looking for the and I'm definitely putting like prove it like from like I'm looking like eventually like I'm looking Sangyon and Info probably by putting on that fake act like Info only fake acting as if like he's like that as if like forming that absolute good bond of friendship with like Sangyon, but like I'm looking like has this interaction between like Sangyon and Info would be that increasing more and more with like each studio that pass by and they'll be like spending more time together and like they'll be interacting more and more and considering at some point I'm considering definitely in order to just totally slip and make that absolute mistake of like accidentally revealing something that some sort of like an information to like Sangyeon while actually interacting with like Sangyeon like info accidentally making that absolute blunder of like a mistake like the eventual scenario that I'm looking of like accidentally revealing something some sort of like a critical information about like the Squid Game that a fresh Squid Game candidate from like the 2024 Squid Game is actually not supposed to know. Like, this is such sort of like a crucial detail connecting to like the Squid Game from the like info totally making that mistake and that accidentally revealing to like Sangyeon like the this scenario that I'm looking at. I'm definitely at that point for like Sangyeon to like notice that instantly. But like Sangyeon totally putting on a fake act at that point from Sangyeon's side, like Sangyeon totally putting on a fake act. That's it, like he didn't notice and that way, like in first well not realizing that he has actually made that huge mistake. And it got himself exposed as like a betrayer, as like a person behind like the Fujians in front of Sangyeon, like in not realizing that while Sangyeon would be like totally realizing that while putting on that as a fake act. And like I'm looking from that point, like I'm looking like in front of info, like I'm looking Sangyeon totally putting on to fake act to like totally trick info. So like at that point, then like I'm looking Sangyeon at that point, if it only realizing that so that all of Sangyeon's like strategies that why then Sangyeon would have tried to like save all Indian candidates like so that's the reason for all of them all of those strategies failing would be precisely because of this lack betrayer number one Indian candidate who would be like probably having some sort of connection to like the Indian would be along the lines like considering like Sangyeon would be at that point figuring out. So like considering that way like Sangyeon like from that point on of realization like Sangyeon like launching this like counter strategy against that info by Sangyeon himself putting on a fake act and totally tricking info with that fake acting of that Sangyeon and that way like Sangyeon totally tricking info and basically achieving that Sangyeon's like for attempt to like save like the game and less and all that like in the scenario that I'm looking and like eventually right is more like I'm going to be about to like finding chapter and stop info like I'm looking maybe or like maybe about to take info's life and maybe at that last second like I'm looking like somehow uh, solely and surely due to like info's that I'm looking like at that final scenario like favoring info and solely dispute that I don't like info barely managing to like survive and escape from like the civilian building is like the scenarios that I'm observing. And then like I'm observing like in season three, which will be in like 2025, like in Holy like make take the revenge on Sangon through like the 2024 civilian. Which like I'm still feeling my observing it will be like much like in totally blackmailing Sangon and threatening Sangon into like forcing Sangon into like entering into like the 2022 civilian by like most likely abducting Sangon's like daughter and threatening to like take her life if Sangon doesn't play like the 2022 game. So like can even just scenario that I'm also remembering and really can also have the frame shit. Like luckily the preemption right now has for like amongst like the current few bunch of like full game candidates. So like right now Sangon has to reveal that like the second full game would be like so Alvin full game like and right among them like the old man that had told Sangon to like keep that a secret and with that old man having like the intent to like take out like a great number of like remaining Julian candidates and that way to like make all that money and leave on the Julian like I'm going to definitely him I'm preferring that old man along with like I'm going to like among like those few Julian candidates to which like I'm right now I will reveal about like the Laguna game. Like I'm also even though that without much great example to San John like before like the first Julian would be beginning of the San John definitely would be like announcing and revealing to like the entire full game that like the next game would be like the Dalgona game like I'm still in the second Squid game like I was bring like while I was definitely bring that it to not be like the Dalgona game still I was bring like in the second Squid game from the second Squid game on definitely but still the my preparation that like uh including like that old man and was bring like a bunch of that Squid game candidates like and it was very impressive that like regardless of that the second Squid game I was bring definitely not being like the Dalgona Squid game I was bring definitely from like the second Squid game on from us at the second game onwards, like I'm definitely splitting it the preparation that like including that Coleman, like I'm also like a bunch of like game candidates would be not only playing like the Squid games, but like I'm looking while playing like the Squid games, they will be also totally focused on basically like leaving the Squid games with that huge fund, huge amount of money that like I'm looking like while playing the Squid games, like they will be also simultaneously also like attempting to that do that using force like trying to like have that sort of Korean candidates lose that Korean while also trying to like complete that Korean like the scenario that I'm man through that attempt itself I'm like not only a lot of good game candidates, innocent good game candidates would be that getting eliminated, but also like the ones that would be like trying to like forcefully like make have like the other good game candidates do like this game and like through their attempt as well like those good game candidates the OG like villains they attempting to like force like the other good game candidates to lose like during the attempt them as well like ending up making some sort of like a mistake and ending up getting eliminated in those two and from like the second studio onwards, it's like getting into scenario that I'm looking for different kind of the frame version. The flavor frame version is for like from like the second studio onwards, like I'm doing like a bunch of game candidates trying to like forcefully by playing the studio like them also simultaneously trying to like forcefully make like the other studio candidates lose and get eliminated in like that studio scenario that I'm doing and I'm like the uh, among their initial targets, like it's definitely able to there will be that like mother Squid Game candidate. It's definitely one of so like that old mother Squid Game candidate would be among like the initial target. It's definitely one of the so like I'm like during that whole attempt of like targeting and trying to like met with her Squid Game, like I'm definitely that resulting in like her about to lose her Squid Game, and at that point I was like her son would be totally seeing that attack on his like mother and another like that some game candidate trying to like save and stop them and save that mother. But like I'm doing like by the like I'm doing like the mother game candidate like would have lost that game and would have got eliminated. It's like the scenario that I'm doing. So like then I'm doing both winners Squid Game candidates like targeting like the sun and trying to like forcefully have like the sun as well. So like the second Squid Game. But like I'm doing at that point I'm preparing it would be Sanjon at that point would be showing up that as Luke savior for like that some Squid Game candidate and I'm like it would be through like Sangyon, this is like entirety of like full like experience, regardless of definitely my position. The like second school game won't be like the alternate again. Still, regardless of that, like it's like Sangyon's like experience and fearlessness, like I'm like Sangyon or like fighting back at that point and becoming that savior of like that some good game candidate. And solely due to that, like I'm in Sangyon, solely due to Sangyon, like that some good game candidate, like surviving and winning like the second Squid game as well, completing like the second Squid game as well. It's like the scenario that I'm referring. So after that, like I'm referring like that some Squid game candidate being in that absolute shock of like losing his like mother, and like how those Squid game candidates had acted in such a villainous manner. And I'm referring like from like the second Squid game onwards, like I'm referring definitely like you did only seeing Sanjon as like absolute strength and courage. And I'm remembering like Sanjon totally seeing that absolute comfort for him. And Sanjon like deciding to like totally protect him. And basically, he would be like the among like the one of the very few good game candidates after like the second good game that will be like totally placing their absolute trust on Sanjon. It's definitely my good friend. So that the senior the film mentioned right now was like that another good game candidate right now saying that like sad girl. So I think that if Jansi and the things that like some things that like Jansi is like quite an and Jansi saying that it's not what you think like at least the actuality of like the situation might be like I'm also saying that while some of the good game candidate is like so extremely concerned about like the situation that particular situation of like Jansi and from Jansi's point of view like Jantu's mindset would be like Janhir might have been totally an accidental pregnancy for like Janhi. It's definitely my big impression. So definitely Janhi might not be desiring a child. It's definitely my personal impression. So like that might be like the actuality of a good situation with like Janhi. So like I'm looking like definitely Janhi even entering like the school game would be solely for Janhi to like settle her step and basically for Jansi to like be able to like live a better life for herself. You know, that this would be like the only thing in like Jansi might definitely might be framed. So like Jansi might not be desiring a child. Would be like might be like the actuality of the situation like about which like I'm definitely pressing like that mother candidate would be totally eventually realizing before she dies like in one of the games like the scenario that I'm about to bring. So number two, like that another Indian candidate would be like eventually finding out about this. And I was referring that another Indian candidate getting experience. Initially, I'm talking like sort of being that totally separate to like change junkies like mind and basically to like for like junkie to like actually have that child. Uh, it's definitely one of the things. But like I'm talking regardless of how much like that mother Indian candidate will be trying to like change junkie's mind. Like I'm looking like a junkie, I'm looking totally telling that Indian candidate that like that she doesn't desire it and that even city I'm looking like her totally in that like totally getting rejected eventually and that junkie eventually telling that mother Indian candidates to that mind her business along the lines and I'm like at that point like I'm like that mother Indian candidate getting extremely angry. So it's like junkie and I'm like her shouting out at like junkie and all that is like the scenario that I'm right. And I would like it to be after all this that like I'm looking like the next good game would be happening exactly scenario that I'm referring. So that I'm referring like once that happens, so like I'm referring maybe like just a remote possibility that like maybe if such a scenario then I'm referring it might be before like the third good game that this will be happening. So like I'm referring like maybe for like a remote possibility I'm referring maybe that mother candidate also surviving the second skill game as well. So like if that's the case then I'm referring like in the should be like after this like force war between like Janti and that mother Killian candidate that like I'm feeling like the third skill game would be like starting. So like in that third skill game I'm different like that mother skill game candidate like still regardless even then like I'm doing like her totally sad I'm different like in between while playing that third skill game I'm different like Janti that totally like her getting once again getting weak by playing while in between like that third skill game. So like I was just like at that point like that mother skill game candidate like totally sacrificing her life to like save that Janki and prevent Janki from getting eliminated solely due to that Janki being pregnant. It's like the scenario that I'm looking at. That way, like I'm looking like Janki surviving and like solely due to like that another Syrian candidate like Janki surviving like the third Syrian. It's like the scenario that I'm looking at. And at that point, I'm looking like that extreme feeling countries at that point possibly feeling maybe like that extreme feeling of that regret and guilt that of that basically. having that quarrel with that mother should be candidate, that like maybe that sacrifice of that mother should be candidate, maybe like eventually changing like Janti's mindset or like mind, and like basically Janti at that point deciding to like basically have her baby is like an individual possible scenario that I'm looking at another great. Like minimum with the restrictions were like if like the mother student candidate survives that, the second to get that number to bring like that would be solely due to like Sanjon, and Sanjon I think it's like the scenario that I was thinking was like the name just thinking of like the premise of that, like I'm not like the student candidate like the winner one sample for definitely would be targeting that specifically definitely would be targeting that number student candidate. Um, in like the second skill game is definitely my favorite. So like if she still survives, then I'm it was it's eventually ending up solely to like Sanjon for protecting her and ensuring that like she survives like that second skill game. So like my personal reaction of that another possible scenario like I'm looking at friends. So like personally my reaction right now as for like Sanjon good friend as well as like the skill game candidate Dae-ho being ex-Marines like and even with like Sanjon like was friend seeing even like a superior ex-Marine officer than compared to like Keiko. Still my personal reimpressions definitely for like an eventual scenario where like I'm personally preferring definitely even while Tejo right now shows that absolute respect toward like Sanjon's good friend ex-Marine officer, superior ex-Marine officer and everything, I'm definitely still preferring my personal reimpressions definitely for like eventually in one of like the experience and definitely preferring Tejo so he did try that good friend of like Sanjo, like the scenario that I'm looking at. Definitely putting that Sanjo's good friend from this point on of realization that like Dae-ho is like an ex-marine officer, Sanjo's good friend like blindly trusting Dae-ho. And like Dae-ho putting on that showing that absolute respect towards like Sanjo's good friend. Like I'm thinking that for that would be like an absolute fake act. It's definitely no relation. But like obviously like Sanjo's good friends would be like only failing to like realize it's like doing the scenario that I'm listening and I'm definitely putting like eventually for they host to like totally eventually one of the students to totally betray like Sanjon with friend and like definitely I'm sort of very my very impression right now definitely for like eventually in one of like the students and the work happening will be eventually through their hosts and that I'm for like Sanjon's good friend will be eventually ending up getting eliminated in one of the students and ending up dying. So like so not even the scenario that I'm seeing. So like I'm feeling like eventually they host totally betraying Sanjon like good friends and basically like that way they hope forcefully betraying and forcefully like ensuring that like Sangon's good friend gets eliminated in one of like those super Indian like Canadian scenario that I'm looking at that. I'm going to bring that point where like say who will be betraying Sangon's good friend. I'm going to like that would be like just an absolute shock to like Sangon's good friend because like that would be like the last thing that he would be expecting from there. It's like the scenario that he would be like until that point like I'm going to bring like Sangon's good friend would be like uh, would be full of that absolute total blind trust towards like Dae-ho as like an Marine officer, definitely my country ambition. So like definitely protecting that is how I'm going to bring like eventually kind of friend would be next good friend would be eventually ending up dying. Like any of the scenarios that I'm going to bring M3 ambition. So like the minimum restrictions that like usually in the coin guys as well as that Jansi will be most likely might have been most likely in like a relationship and I was like eventually one like Jansi might have gotten pregnant like and I'm thinking my impression that like it might have been like an accidental pregnancy and I'm looking like at that point like the son guy might have wanted to like break up with like Jansi and at that point like definitely like Jansi might have not been able to like those like the empty coin guy definitely remember 20 so like Jansi might have been so in love with like the empty coin guy that like she might have not been able to like bring herself to that to race up with like the MD going guy. So like I'm looking like so especially because of that like I'm looking like she it might have been like the MD going guy that might have told Jansi at that point to like they see to like to not have the child definitely remember pregnancy and that way like I'm looking even though deep down like Jansi might have wanted the child like I'm looking Jansi might have prioritized like the MD going guy love and that person like particular for like the Bitcoin guy and like maybe due to that like John might have taken the decision to like not have a child but definitely my birthday ambition. So like I'm looking like eventually I'm still thinking my birthday ambition that like it would be like the on the singing candidate like basically sacrificing his life to that save Junkie, and I'm also like that totally changing. That would be such a shock for Junkie, and I'm also like that totally changing Junkie, and I'm also like Junkie that as part of like the change, like I'm also like Junkie also changing up decision to from not from Junkie not wanting a child solely due to like then we going guy to like Junkie deciding to like actually do as exactly as like he genuinely down the stairs and like down the journey from that point on like deciding that like she will have a child, she will have her child and basically Jansi at that point deciding to like break up with that then going guy. It's like the scenario that I'm looking. So like I'm looking, this might be currently it might be due to like this whole situation with like the accidental pregnancy of like Jansi's totally not in like and he going side to like totally feel that absolute dislike towards like he might be the reason for like them staying separate and them not staying together in like or talking to each other within like the Studian candidate building after like entering into like the Studian candidate building and basically the like that and like them we going guy are like totally like uh, actually like strangers and like staying apart like to be especially because of like the MD guy totally having that like absolute profession of like dislike towards like Janti due to her current situations like it definitely might be like the case with Lima with reimbursement. So like the Lima with reimbursement right now for like the NG guy like basically being so extremely serious about it as well as like him being so extremely triggered, him getting so extremely triggered with like what Thanos did with his like so like I'm starting to be the question because of like the NG guy would be having that would be only having like a tragic backstory before he became like the NG guy. Definitely my preparation like the NG guy and the super ring would be only have might be only having like a tragic distant past where during his like his childhood like he might have faced like extreme hunger and then person like he would be like then Bitcoin guy would be someone who totally seriously knows like the value of substance especially my brother he would be someone who totally and absolutely respect would especially my brother ambition. So like this might be like that exact factor that might have caused like in Bitcoin guys to like right now being so extremely triggered with like Thanos and like him attacking Thanos in this especially because of trigger. Definitely my point. And this won't be due to like then Bitcoin guy currently being like so extremely like extremely hungry to like the point like that caused like him to like attack Thanos, which will be more even more than that because it will be due to like the indeed how much like when Bitcoin guy would be like knowing like the value of food and how much he respects food would be like the precise reason for like him being so him getting so extremely triggered with that Thanos right now uh due to what Thanos did with his food. It's definitely my preemption right now. So like the minimal preemption right now as for like info so casually and like with that as with confidence like they're trying to like interfere like the attack by like Thanos on like then Bitcoin guy like the minimal preemption right now is for like that leap of info right now to get attacked by like Thanos is like the scenario that I'm thinking. So like info getting attacked and info getting injured to like a certain extent. And it would be only at that point that I'm like the civilian workers would be like stopping like Thanos is like the scenario that I'm looking at. That as well as brain like would be Info's plan, practical plan to like make himself appear as convincing as possible to all the other game candidates that basically he is like totally one among them that like because like to totally convince them that basically he's that he's like just another to totally put on that fake action trick for like the remaining game candidates into like genuinely think that like that just one among them and it's definitely memorable. So like maybe Info himself might be considering like the possibility of like basically even though he's like putting on the disguise as like a Indian candidate, like the possibility of like maybe his behavior, his fake acting totally like slipping at some point and causing like maybe like the even any of like Indian candidate to feel even doubtful of suspicious of like Info like to eradicate such an eventual future possibility under the point be like the first reason for like I'm putting right now like the like current intervention that like in also right now attempting as like Thanos is attacking like when we going definitely I'm looking right now like Thanos to like attack Inho and Inho getting injured to like a certain extent to like the scenario that I'm observing for another preemption right now. So like the preemption right now with like Inho despite of like Inho like old age like into like so easily like take for like both Thanos as well as like Thanos' friend like I'm with like Sangyeon right now staring at Inho. Definitely I'm referring this point would be like the point where like Sangyeon might have actually taken In-ho like seriously, like that studio candidate was like seriously different from all the other studio candidates. Just like the scenario that I was in. So like I was like it to be that totally wrong kind of attention that like In-ho would be right now gaining from Sang-John's point of view. It's definitely not the same. So while staff would be like totally to like actually might have intended to like basically actually to like blend in as much as like possible for as like the full game and so that like could like stay with like Sanjon and basically figure out all of like Sanjon's moves and Sanjon's plans to like save like the remaining full game candidates and to like destroy his end is the single one of the Sanjon's plans. Like even though this might be like the actual goal and intent of I'm just saying like right now Info might have acted out in like an emotional manner, which definitely meant correct. So it's because of like Info taking like one that you would be taking the games like extremely to games extremely seriously and but like Info might not have like it was like like even if it was like a special stood game like like Info might have been like a physical game back in like 2020 like if it was such a situation that Hero might have been like totally perfectly fine with like the Squid candidates fighting among each other. But like right now, since it's not such a situation that was different like outside of the games, like I'm different like the Squid candidates like fighting each other, like I'm different like maybe might have only triggered info, especially my favorites. And so like like that way like info might have like the emotion of hand up might have like right now certain within info and might have caused info to like act in like more of like an emotional manner. And that way info might have temporarily forgot about like blending in and like basically keeping that stealth and that might be how like info right now might have like easily overthought and basically for both Thanos as well as the other civilian candidate, and that way gain the attention of not only like the entirety of like the remaining civilian candidate straight away instantly falling on but not only that, but definitely Sanjon definitely might have at this very point from this very point on like I'm looking like In-ho would be someone like Sanjon would be always having this like keeping his like eye on like and always like would be like carefully observing from this point on. It's definitely my thing. With like each and every single interaction of like info from this point on. Like I'm looking at Sanjon would be precisely and carefully observing. Definitely my preference. Because like I'm looking even from this point on, like I'm looking like something I'm preferring like would be getting off of Sanjon when it comes to like info. Specifically for when it comes to like info alone. Is like might be what might have happened right now. It's definitely my preference. So like I'm going to tell me all that reasons and meaning behind that current care that like Sangyon is staring at like info for both Thanos and Galactus right now. It's definitely my preferred impression, right? So definitely my print right now is for like even while info is that like only the fact that like info can has like that extremely high rate like the band this has that extreme high can throw such extreme high speed punches and attacks like like the actuality of like the reason would be most likely not due to that in-house doing like an X-Marine or anything like Sango's good for thing, but like in actually like I'm looking like actually like the reason for that might be that in-house like failure against like Sangyon while during like info and Sangyon's like childhood discipline and crimson because like I'm still remember the revision that like and that during like info and Sangyon's like childhood they might have totally played like the childhood studios and during back then like I'm like it might have been always like info that might have been like repeatedly losing to like Sanjon. It might have been always info that might have been losing and it might have been always Sanjon that might have been always winning. Supplement to right. Like a like time pass years passed and like person grew up like I'm like without much creative like self like even from childhood self like I'm like eventually like info might have like stop ended up eventually like after like losing more and more like I'm looking against like Sangon info might have eventually ended up being fed up with like the games and info might have left like the that playground and like I might have stopped coming to play there in that playground. Maybe might have been what might have happened, especially when I was playing. And then since then like I was like even from that childhood like in home might have been totally practicing and with in a non-stop manner like in home might have been like totally practicing with that absolute determination to that one day be able to like visit Sanjon in like the civilians to do another like I was like since that since in home like childhood you days like I'm talking like in home might have been like training all sorts of taking all sorts of training and like going through all sorts of extreme trainings and like sharpening up to like improve like reflexes and skills and everything like I remember like uh might have been doing that consistently since that your like your full childhood phase to like the person in that such an experience consistent daily basis definitely it might be like what might have happened is definitely another like I'm definitely might have never been able to like grow out of like that whole memories, the childhood memories of like losing to like Sangyon in that childhood period. Right? Because of Sangyon, like as like Sangyon grew up, like Sangyon might have forgotten everything about like the childhood experience that he used to play and everything like Sangyon might have only forgotten this year's life and might have only forgotten about all that. While in the case of Shin-ho, like even while Shin-ho as well, might have only got this year's life and might have had a good job and everything like even then like I was like that those memories of like that childhood. Might have never been able to like grow out of it. So like I was going to that memory always like haunting in home, like I was like in home myself. That the sharpening just like skills, just like agility, just like speed and reflexes and everything each and every single day from that this distance past even to like percentage that remember and this might be like the sort of for like info having such like being able to like easily for like someone like Sano as well as like his friend like basically even in like a two was info even at like old age. So being so easily being able to like say or for Sano as well as like his like friend all by himself like to be most likely due to this reason. Uh, it's definitely not the same. But I definitely don't agree on this right now. So like Neo right now, thinking of like that which is the father, like I was definitely the soft phone of that Neo right now has towards that which is the father, which only due to that which is the totally reminding Neo of her own innocent daughter. And since like Neo herself would be definitely the sole reason Neo will be working as like a good game work up will be solely due to for like Neo to like that way make that money, which like Neo the almost like the entire of that money like I'm putting like new will be as soon as like that each year's like three games would be over like new will be like spending like the entirety of like that money on like that person who's like something for like any also not like basically you know using that entirety of like that money that she will be making by doing her work as like a full game work of like she would be giving all that money to him and to find Neol's like missing daughter. It's definitely never favorite. So like since like Neol is like part of like the Squid Game as like a Squid Game World Cup. Since Neol is like doing that solely for like Neol to like save find and save Neol's daughter and since like Neol so like Neol will be able to like only empathize with like that little bit father because of it. So that because of like of Neol knowing that that individual's father like the sole reason he is doing like the Squid Game as like the Squid Game candidate is solely because of exactly like Neol like it's solely because of like him wanting to like save his daughter that little girl as well. It's definitely my brain. So like I'm just like definitely New York would be like solely due to like New York being able to like empathize and relate to like that little father situation so much like and because like that like I'm just even while like New York would be like how eliminated all those players with like in a cold manner like I'm saying when it's solely when it comes to like that little father like I'm just like New York would be totally extremely like feeling that absolute worry and fear of like the possibility of like basically that little girl's father like losing one of like the upcoming two games and Williams dying and I'm definitely predicting like the eventual scenario that I'm sitting on to definitely that like is not only that the like that little girl's father would be like dying either in like the I'm seeing what was the possibility that it will be most likely in like the very second game itself uh, that like I'm that that little girl's father won't be not only getting eliminated won't be not only get losing that second Squid Game, but like I'm like it would be most likely New York that would be having the task to like eliminate that little girl's father as to be losing in like that second Squid Game. It's like in the scenario that I was referring. So like I was like in like the second Squid Game, like I was like definitely even while still thinking about the evolution that like the second Squid Game definitely won't be like the Dalgona Squid Game. Still I'm regardless of whatever like the second Squid Game would be like I'm still it would be in such that the nature of like the second Squid Game of the would be such a nature that simply the Squid Game workers would be like in person personally like would be like monitoring each of like the Squid Game candidates that they would be performing like the second Squid Game. It's like with the scenario that I'm looking for. So like that way, like I'm looking like coincidentally that the scenario happening where like coincidentally Neol would be like the precise person that will be in charge of like monitoring like that little girl's father good game candidate is like that is girl's father like good game performance in like the second Squid Game like the scenario that I'm looking for. So like I'm looking for like him totally losing him totally like losing in that like getting the second Squid Game around it's like the scenario that I'm looking for. So like I'm looking for like two possibilities like for like maybe like the moment he gets the second Squid Game wrong itself, I'm like involved with that absolute like hesitation, like basically take eliminating him and taking his life with that one scenario that I'm looking at. Or like I'm looking while he would be making the mistake, like I'm looking like Neo would be stealthily trying to like save him, like and but like I'm looking right then itself like Neo as like Neo would be about to try to like save him itself, like Neo would be like totally noticing like the other Squid Game workers like seeing all the like basically. So that at that point, like I was like as me will be about to help him, like me was totally noticing like some of the game of just like basically like observing me also. At that point, itself, like New being for at that point, like New York totally feeling as well like he has no other option, and basically New York at that point, like basically while going through such an extreme suffering, like New York totally eliminating that individual's father at that point with like the eventual scenario. I'm considering like it will be one of these two possibilities, like the scenario that I'm going to get. Like I'm regardless, like I'm thinking about my brain to that, like it will be exactly constantly, eventually ending up exactly New York. That will be like taking the life of that individual father. Uh, on we would be choosing like Squid Game, and I'm sitting in my preparation that it will be definitely like the second Squid Game, like the single scenario that I'm looking for. I'm definitely my perception right now as for like info right now, totally dying as probably putting on a fake and talking, telling Son John about like his like wife situation while his like info's wife has died like years back. Like definitely my perception right now that it will be even while he reveals the full backstory to like Son John, like I'm looking for definitely in that backstory, definitely I'm considering like that older clients that basically offered to like help info back then. I'm considering that older client might have definitely been in now, would definitely not the prevention. Back then, like info might have not known that like in is like info's father, would definitely not the prevention. So definitely, and that helping of like that oldest client at like the job where like info used to work back then, like that oldest client that basically offered to like help like since even being like that oldest client in that precise place where info was like working might have been also due to like Ilnam totally planning ahead. Because like even back then Ilnam might have been secretly conducting these students. So like even back then Ilnam might have been planning ahead because like the frontman back then might have been like Ilnam's like good friend. So like I was looking like that good friend of Ilnam might have been getting so really old. So like I was looking like by the time he won't be able to he won't be his like best friend won't be able to like continue being like the frontman to carry on like info legacy like info of that villainous things of like doing conducting its to game to carry on that like villainous kind of like a legacy of like Ilna might have pre-planned even way back that basically once his that friend would be reaching that hold of like news, like the front man to replace him would definitely be his son, Winho. Might have been what like Ilna might have planned even way back, it's definitely manipulation. This might be the precise reason for like that old client whom would definitely might have been like Ilna, like being like the client at like that exact job place where like info was working, definitely not the same. It's still only eventually through trapping in by placing that stealthy trap on like info to like eventually have info get fired from his job and that way to like to your info into like entering into like the civilians and that way through like info like and that way to like help info win like the skill game and basically once like info will be winning that skill game like at that point for like enough to show up in front of info and basically that at that point for like enough to give info that's the offer of like the job of like the frontman might have been like enough plan of the remember preparation. So like I would definitely that might have been like a framing of like back then when when info had basically a lot of accused of like accepting a bribe and basically that had gotten fired. Like that might have been like a framing of info by Ilnam. So that might have been that stealthy framing of that info done by Ilnam that might have resulted in that info losing its job. Might have been what might have happened back then. It's definitely not a brain person. So definitely what might have also happened back then might have been that the scenario that I was putting is like when info had gotten that money from like Innam back then without realizing Innam was like Info's father, like and everything. Like at that point was Info, especially back then, like this was like whole white situation and everything. Like Info might have been so really happy that he got all that money and then like the thought of like him that way being able to like pay for like his like wife surgery and that way the possibility of like him being able to like save his wife, like that might have been so given that much of like a joy and hope for like info that I'm looking like might have given the money at like the hospital and then like I was like what and then like I'm like it was like white surgery might have been scheduled within like a few days. So like I was like might be precisely during then like I'm thinking that like coincidentally like Janko might have had this situation with like Janko's like kidney issues and everything might have happened during that time of so like I'm even sure that times like might have been such as back then like involved during then might have been in such a joyful and hopeful mode that basically of like the hope that like is that when info has absolutely no hope and basically might have been even thinking of like selling info like kidney for that like with that money for like info to be able to like say for like this vice surgery like might have even been thinking of such extreme extent while it might be doing then that like I'm going to like that all the client in like info like office like place like I'm going to bring that might have like offered to give all this money to like info definitely one of the that person might have definitely given them it's definitely not the like I'm going to like because of this whole involving let's say for that expensive operations that might have been like the case. So because of like involving let's say for that get for that money and being able to pay for that operation like it might have been supposed to take place in like 3 or 4 days. Which definitely not the benefit. So like I'm looking at that point like info might have been only joyful and hopeful. And it might be during this time that coincidentally like Janko might have had his like kidney issue and I'm going to like at that point I'm trying to like info being in such a joyful mood like info might have already spent like actually like info might have been already planning on like selling this like kidney to like save his wife like and to be like already due to like enough saying in the whole theory and for that money that like info might have not had to like sell this like kidney like that kind of like at that point when coincidentally Jung Ho might have had a situation with like the kidney failure kind of like a situation like at that point like when while Jung Ho sadly needed like a kidney like to start by like at that point I was like info might have not thought much at all and info might have database that I could like give one of its kidneys to save the select from the Jungho might have been what might have happened. It certainly might have been the reimbursement. And right now, my reimbursement is that like even by doing so, like I was like info might have been also well and fully aware that like Jungho is not info's like actual brother, literally later for the also might be reimbursed. So like this might have been what might have happened and like also like it might have been after like the surgery to like for like info to give this like kidney to like jump and like once that procedure might have been over and info might have woken up. It might have been only at that point that like info might have shockingly found out that basically like his wife surgery was not performed because of like that money that Info had paid to like the doctor to perform that surgery to save his wife might have not happened. Might have that surgery might have not been done by the doctor. So due to like the whole case against like Info might have what happened due to like enough deadly framing Info and basically like Info that way getting framed into like the case of accepting a bribe and that way like that money that Info might have paid to the doctor to perform like surgery might have been confiscated back by like the police might have been what might have happened that way like that surgery that might have been scheduled and intended to like take place on imposed quite like might have not happened and that way that imposed twice might have been on the verge of death during that time so like that surgery not take place during then like I'm like enforced that a wife might have while giving birth might have died along with like the baby as well might have like son as well baby as it was like baby as well as his wife might have died during that whole pregnancy might have been what might have happened. It's definitely not discrimination. So uh, that might have been what might have happened. It's definitely not discrimination. So like while info might have woken up after like giving his like kidney to like Janko, like just might have been like that absolute shocking news that info might have got. Remember at that point still like info might have without even saying a word like info might have straight away left his home might have been what might have happened. It's definitely my observation. And then like after the like info might have been like without like at that point without a job like info might have been totally struggling to survive and able to like basically eventually like that might have ended up with like an info might have been trying to like get another job like but like info might have no matter how much info might have tried like info might have like that whole accepting of like the bribe such a case like info get having such a case might have resulted in like info not being able to like get another job at all. So definitely not the mention. So that way like info might have had absolutely no money and info might have been struggling to survive and they were like the whole mindset of like Intro might have been like extremely like a disturbed mindset and Intro might have not even wanted to like see neither Junko nor his mother is because like of that Info having given his kidney to like Junko, which like Info might have been initially planning on basically selling to like pay for like the operation of like Info's wife and everything and all that. So actually due to all this everything like maybe Info might have not even wanted to see neither Junko nor in-house mother, jump-out mother at that point is like the scenario that I'm in. So like in-house, this might have been seriously struggling by Jumpo and his mother might have been desperately searching for info, but like they might have not been able to find it. So might have been what might have happened to them. So like I'm also like as info might have been totally struggling and might have been totally struggling to like pay off like the debt as well as the crypto rent and everything like it might be different than that. I'm also like Ilna might have the realistic Ilna might have made this like next move by simply sending that game card onto like the place where like info might have been living. And that might be how like info might have ended up in like the 2016 experience might have been what might have happened. It's definitely member pretty much. So like I'm looking like even up like winning like the 2015 Squid Games, like I'm looking like definitely info might have Ilna might have only met info at that point up like info on like the 2015 Squid Game and at that point like I'm looking like uh Info might have been shocked at seeing like this like Info's like oldest client at this like previous job see like the person running like this game like Info might have had that shock and realization at that point. And I was like at that point like Ilna might have maybe also told Info that basically that Ilna just like Info's like actual father as well is yet like I was like due to that reason like I was like maybe like Info might have totally poor info might have totally innocent the innocent might have been of like an innocent mindset and might have never thought like the possibility of that right against like info like the possibility of it being framed onto like info by Ilnam to eventually get info to like basically play like the Squid Games and basically eventually to take up the job of like the frontman this like possibility info might have never been able to like foresee or like comprehend, especially my mother ambition. So like some of like info might have been like at that point it might have been a great job for info who until that point might have not known like who was like actually part of that form. It's definitely my mother. So like I'm saying the moment in that might have revealed to info that like he's like his father, like I'm like info might have totally been straight away to leave from that state. Even to like the person number like info would be totally believe that basically that older client of that info income that basically had paid all that money to like info back then might have been sold it out of like income totally like having that love for like info and not to like frame info like income having any role to like play in that info falling into that bright cave which eventually ended up in like info's life eventually ending up into like vice versa and info eventually ending up the place where he is as currently as like the frontman as like the person from this game like basically all this happening due to that villain factor that illness that was like in hope even to the person who did only unaware of which definitely man was and I'm just pretty towards like the end I'm considering like maybe most likely towards the end of like season 3 this is when I was like eventually info will be finally finding out about that. It's definitely my preference. And that spring was like maybe being like that ultimate factor that might result in like in totally despising Ilnam at that point. It's definitely my preference. And that might be spring might be what like eventually result in like in taking the decision to like stop like the good games, just like an eventual scenario that I'm going to only putting and my question. So people think that at that point, like Info's like whole mindset might change because like at that point, Info the friends would be only coming to a realization that it's only due to like the Squid Games taking place, like that Info had like lost everything and lost his life, Info's life was destroyed, and had lost his wife and lost everything. Lost his wife and lost his child, and like Info it was like entire life was like totally destroyed solely due to like the Squid Games, like totally coming to such a realization like and that resulting in like finally taking the decision to like continue like the Squid Games anymore and to totally put a permanent end to like the Squid Games not only in like in Hope country but also all across the world like like maybe like in Hope finally coming to such a decision but like like maybe by the time info will be coming to such a decision maybe something to totally go wrong and maybe like info even ending up that it's also like a possibility that I'm looking maybe like by then like the police would be like showing up and infiltrating at for like during that whole clash uh, between like the civilian workers and like the police and all that like maybe like info even ending up getting uh, attacked by one of like the weapons of like the police and them. So like maybe for that ending up dying is like the scenario that I was saying and like maybe like right maybe info dying in front of Sanjon. It's also like about that I was saying and right before he knows that like info telling Sanjon to like basically info totally giving his like wish and desire to like Sanjon, which will be the very same desire as that of Sanjon as well at that point, which will be to like stop like the civilians all over like the world to put and permanently put an end to like the civilians all over like the world. Uh, and that way to like save the world. It would be along the lines of like the final which the dying wish that info would be having this like info would be like telling Sanjon at that point. And I'm from that point on Sanjon like setting off to achieve that ultimate dream, that ultimate goal of both Info as well as Sanjo to make that a reality. That can even be a possible scenario, that final scenario that I was bringing up frame. It's like definitely the same business right now as for like solely due to like the organ trading, like the studio workers right now, like they will be focusing on like trying to like take out like the civilian candidates, yet like keep them alive. Like I'm like definitely the foreign like eventually resulting in like some of like the Syrian candidates like ending up no, totally actually like even escaping as like they will be trying to like forcefully take like the still like the organs like as like Syrian workers would be that like eventually like among like the Syrian candidates that would be like eventually failing uh, getting eliminated like I'm still since they would be kept alive like like before like they would be able to like perform like the surgery like like some of like the Squid Game candidates like somehow managing to like basically still escape. It's like there is a scenario that I'm looking not some like I'm looking like just one or two candidates with that way like escaping. It's like there is a scenario that I'm looking at. Definitely I'm looking like that precise Squid Game worker who's like right now firing like the weapon again like for like the second time to like ensure that like the Squid Game candidates are like that have failed like the games are eliminated like I'm going that the Squid Game worker would definitely be Neol and it would be so totally due to like Neol being against the organ trading. Neol would be like totally well and fully aware of like the secret organ trading thing going on within like the school game building. So like I'm always totally against that and to like ensure that like that doesn't happen would be like the precise reason for like any or totally like because like Neol would be having even while Neol is like a civilian worker, like still Neol would be having that sort of extent of like an empathy as for like because like Neol will be able to like think from like the point of like the failed civilian candidates as to like the extreme suffering they would have to go through while being kept alive and during like the whole training and everything. So definitely like Neo like empathetic side would be the reason for like Neo totally like not wanting like the Sugian candidates to like go through such extreme misery and Neol would be also again like and possibly even sick and again like the whole organ trading and everything. So like this to totally prevent all of that. Like I'm looking for like to prevent or like to make it hard for them to do the whole trading, philanthropic trading and everything. Like I'm looking for like might be the reason for like Neol trying to like ensure to like not have like the face Indian candidates be kept alive for like the trading is definitely my consideration. This might be the reason for like there being that second weapon injury, which like takes the life of those eliminated singing candidates, like the scenario that I'm considering and also. So like definitely not the 300% right now as for like the William worker wearing like the black uniform, like the officer, like basically right now summoning me or like and definitely I was very understand that if going to sit with that like officers, basically the flag I think like two of them already being revealed like those two officers, like those two civilian workers with like the black uniform, like I'm just saying both of them would be like the closest and the most trustworthy friend of In-house. So definitely membership reason. That is the third reason for like them both like being of the top hierarchy position of like them both possibly like I think like so the fact that there might be only two officers left. So like them both I don't like having that like black outfit would be basically because of the reasons definitely when permission and definitely I'm looking right now like the officer like only sustaining like Neol as to like while Neol like basically took the life of like the eliminated Indian candidates and I'm looking like at that point like I'm considering Neol totally an emotional manner like in emotional and like angry manner like I'm like Neol talking back and Neol telling the officer that basically that she's like totally against like the whole organ stealing and everything. It's like the scenario that I'm looking for. So and that's like the reason that she like basically eliminated like the failed studio candidates and all that. Like to be along the lines like she all will be telling. So like I'm referring at that point like I'm referring like the officer like basically threatening me all that basically if sad like I'm referring like the officer telling me all about like how it took like the whole organ stealing business to like how that's like an extremely high priority for like the officer and basically at that point like I'm referring like the officer threatening me or that basically if me or like basically breaks once again if like me or basically like he uses the weapon Neo's weapon for like a second time like on like any Squid candidate that has already been attacked using like a weapon. Like basically then at that point on the spot like Neo would be getting eliminated by like the other Squid worker. It would be like that threat of like a warning that I'm looking at that point like the officer giving Neo like the scenario that I'm looking. So like at that point I was like Neo totally going silent and I'm like Neo would be like going order to like go back to her home. Like scenario that I'm looking and I'm definitely putting in like the second Squid game like I'm looking like definitely I'm looking like in the second Squid game like the living the father like I'm looking like him totally like fading in like the second Squid game yet like I'm looking like the Squid game worker which would be not Neo like I'm looking like another Squid game worker like basically like using the weapon on like that individual's father and I was like you'll be using like the civilian worker will be using the weapon in such a manner that it really like that like the little girl father like that civilian candidate would be kept breathing. It's definitely my suspension, but like would be badly injured but kept breathing. So like I'm going to say that would be like the worst situation that like Neo would be able to like imagine this like the scenario that I'm going to have like that little girl father who's going through the very same kind of like a situation as that of like Neo like basically with whom like Neo can empathize the most and resonate the most with and relate to the most with and whom like Neo will be caring so much about like basically him going through like such a suffering of like the organ stealing and everything while being kept alive and everything like so like I'm looking definitely at that point like Neo won't be able to like control himself and I'm looking like at that point like I'm looking like Neo totally like using a weapon and basically Neo at that point taking the life of that little girl's father at that point who'll be already badly injured like going to like Neo totally at that point like ensuring to like take the life of that uh little father to like eat and like suffering like the scenario that I'm looking only for. And at that point, self I'm looking like the other good game workers like I'm looking like totally trying to like capture Neo, like the scenario that I'm looking at. So like I was like at that point like Neo totally running off, and I was for like Neo, I was trying to find out that Neo would have totally studied like a great portion of like the area of like the entire game building, like the scenario that I'm looking. So like I'm looking Neo totally straight going up to like the room, and I was like from there like I'm looking like that's the side like air ventilation, like top ceiling area pathway through like the ceiling of like the room like I'm through before like revealed in like the uh during like the season 1 like during like the 2022 game like which like Savior had only found out like I'm like basically uh that exact through that exact same pathway like I'm like Neo as well might have only figured out that air ventilation pathway uh, about this like the scenario that I'm living. So like I'm thinking as like Neol would be shaped by like the game of those to like eliminate Neol like I'm because Neol at that point of the escaping through that air ventilation pathway. It's like in the scenario that I'm basically with and shifting the mention that like that air ventilation pathway the ceiling would be like spanning all across like the entire things to game building and it would be like an extremely huge network which is so like that way Neol escaping through that air ventilation network and I'm like the that way the studio workers like Tommy is just trying to be able to like catch me on like the scenarios that I'm looking at. So like that way I'm going to run like a new totally totally using her ultimate strategy and like I'm was like new at that point like through the air ventilation I'm was like eventually new totally like returning from like the air ventilation into like a specific area within like the studio building where like the CCTV cameras won't be present and that way like new stealthily like eventually taking the life of one of like the studio workers and like new totally that way disguising as like another game worker with like a different game worker number like the scenario that I'm looking at. That way like I'm looking like eventually near like returning back to like the to like return back as like a food game worker once again with that absolute disguise and stealth is like an eventual scenario that I'm looking at. Even put the pressure that like it eventually being like most like it while like Neol would be hiding in that air ventilation ceiling set of area that I'm looking like eventually Neol like moon through the air ventilation ceiling area into like reaching like the game candidate room and there like I'm looking like a Neol not hearing some sort of like a private interaction of like Sangyeon and at that point like Neo totally shockingly realizing how much like of like a different person like that Sangyeon is like the kind of person Sangyeon is like Neo only realizing at that point and Neo at that point shockingly realizing as to like why she had seen Sangyeon in that very same place where like Neo had basically wants to like just has been going to like the past multiple times to for like Neo to be able to like find her daughter like that place where like Neo is like paying all that money to like find her store. Like basically her seeing Sangyeon there as like why she had seen Sangyeon there and all that like I'm like Neo totally finding out by overhearing through that air ventilation network area on top of like junior candidate who might I'm going to be talking about all this to like to maybe or like to one of like the junior candidates with whom like Sanjon might be bonding by them like the scenario that I was doing. And like Sanjon's like ultimate goal to like put an end to like the school games as well. Like basically while Sanjon was saying all like I'm listening like never probably or hearing all the stealthily from like the top of like the ceiling in that for that air ventilation network was like an even possible scenario that I was doing. And that way like our hearing all this could be like what eventually resulting in like Neol totally forming a plan in her mind to like basically stealthily return back into like the studio building after like taking out one of like the studio workers and putting on the uniform and that way through that such a disguise for like Neol to probably return back to like the Squid Game and basically for Neo to like help Sangyeon out, like Chatri reveals to like Sangyeon that basically Neo is like totally have like the same goal as like Sangyeon to like put an end to like the Squid Game. And but like Sangyeon, while Neo would be hearing Sangyeon like after Neo would be also under different decks would be and I was like Neo maybe trying to make a deal as well with like Sangam also like a popular representative because once like Neo would be realizing that like what hearing and possibly realizing that like Sanjon really wants to like even after giving like this winner of this against Sanjon is like so passionate and genuine that like Sanjon wants to put an end to like this video and that like showed his support like Sanjon right now being presented in like CBM once like Neo would be realizing all this like It's like Neo totally already would be might have been like a good game or even like doing like the continuous game when like Sanjon had won like the continuous game and just like that way like one would be known that Sanjon like was extremely wealthy as well like Neo totally even eventually forming a deal with like Sanjon eventually. It's also like a possibility that absolute sense like Neo even forming a deal, figure a deal with like Sanjon where like Neo would be like offering her help to like Sangyo because like Neo would be knowing by working as like a Squid game worker like in that Squid game building like Neo would be knowing like the majority of like the agents within that Squid game building and everything. So like Neo would be offering her help to like Sangyo to like bring down like the Squid games and basically to capture like the command and everything. But in exchange like Sangyo would be having to like pay Neo like that much money that would be required for like Neo to be able to like stay for like that illegal like surgery so that like Neo will be able to like freeze that illegal. That would be like the only thing at that point in like Neo's mind because like I'm definitely definitely to be Neo that would be like eventually taking the life of that illegal part of so like I'm like definitely there will be that guilt and I'm Neo from that point on would be determined to like basically to somehow like save at least save like the daughter of like that little daughter of that person and basically to be there for like that daughter like not only to like say to be able to like pay for that surgery and save that little girl but also to like to be there for her and look after her in place of like that little girl's father whom you know by then would have taken the life of so like in the scenario that I'm looking for and that way like I'm bring like an interior that such a healthy and secret state being formed between like New York and San John's like an Indian scenario. So that I'm going to bring on Rambus. So like the name Rambus right now as for like the red telephone in like this person in like the room of like the office of like the game of with like the black outfit like and like certainly that a red telephone would be like its only purpose would be to like contact just like the front man alone. So certainly not the Rambus. Though should be just meant for like the frontman to make communication with like the officers and for like the officers to like make communication with like the frontman and definitely with them. And with like enough that's like I'm talking like the frontman or like info would be having like absolutely no need for like any telephone in his person certainly with them. So but like I was doing right now with like info like having in like the guys like a full game internet like I'm doing definitely I'm doing there would be like a temporary front man and I'm doing that temporary front man as well would be like the closest friend and most trustworthy friend of like info would be like the current front man is definitely my secondary ambition. So it's a replacement front man is definitely my brand. So like I'm doing that right now. But right now, like I'm trying like communication to be happening through that red telephone in like the room of like the officer, and it would be still not to like info, but to like that replacement from that is like the scenario that I'm trying. At the minimum three of the time right now with like an extremely disappointed John Ford right now, approaching like the police station, like that minimum three of the right now with like that like John Ford with last him having lost like the access to that's the location of like San John and still not knowing where the studio might have been. Like I'm preferring definitely John Ford right now they're trying to like see the help of like the police. But like I'm preferring definitely without any evidence, like I'm preferring still they would be standing strong on that point itself. Like basically they won't be like offering their help at all to like Janho at all, regardless of whatever Janho. I'm just going right now, Janho desperately trying to like convince them, like the chief as well as like the police officers around them, around like the chief and Janho, like with like everything Janho has gone through, like Janho explaining in detail, trying to like explaining in detail, doing everything to like convince them to like that way get their helps. But still, like I'm doing, the chief will be still standing strong on the stand that they believe that he knows evidence like the scenarios that I'm exploring. So like I'm looking that way like an extremely enriched Janko, like I'm looking like leaving that station at that point of like the scenario that I'm looking. And then I'm looking what Janko will be doing would be like I'm looking like Janko at that point breaking in into like Sangyon's like pink model and I'm looking like Janko totally like breaking it to that within like the pink model and like stealing that huge amount of like that money that like Jung Yoon has got in his like pink model and then also like Jung Ho is like using that money like basically creating his own army of like strong and skilled people like ex marines and all this like a great number of people like definitely Jang-ho like basically gathering up a huge army, like like a huge army, and like Jang-ho totally along with them, like Jang-ho totally getting on multiple forts, like Jang-ho would be like offering them hefty sum of money, and like even though it's not even Jang-ho's money, like Jang-ho would be totally desperate at that point. That like Jang-ho only using Jang-ho's money and like offering them like hefty sum of money in exchange for like finding like this good game island, and then like Jang-ho not only like using that single boat of that whole fisherman, but like I'm looking like Jumbo, like using that money, like buying a bunch of boats or like buying a bunch of getting like a bunch of like a great number of like fishermen, uh, for like a great number of boats and basically and like that way like I'm from Jumbo with like a huge army of that killed people like I'm looking all armed with that great number of weapons that will be still present and remaining within that shopping model and like them all getting armed and then within them all like traveling from like that for different a bunch of multiple different number of uh, boats and just leave them all setting off to like the sea to like find that William Island of like looking out of that and by then like I'm like the chief would be like finding Jumbo and the chief would be like without that chief would still be feeling that kind of like a regret kind of like a feeling or like a guilty kind of like a feeling like even while the chief would be standing strong to like basically of like for like the chief wanting evidence like and then still like the chief came down will be like kind of feeling that kind of like regret kind of not like a full kind of like a feeling about like the because of the chief not being able to like have jump off I was like so like I was like the chief by then like I was would be approaching Junko and like would be talking to like Junko and then like that whole interaction between Junko and she the police chief eventually resulting in like police chief alone like they will starting to like go with like Junko in for like the game and definitely very ambition so like I'm just like the chief telling Junko that basically Junko better find like the evidence so like I'm looking like so that like if like the chief steal like the evidence for himself, like if Janko can like show any even a single evidence of like anything connected to like the single solid evidence of like anything connected to like the Squid Games or like the Squid Game Island like for like the chief, then like the chief would just straight away alert things like all the remaining officers and they at that point they would all be like rushing into that one would be along the lines of like the help that like the police chief at that point due to the threat that would be offering Janko. Like the scenario that I'm in. So like I'm like multiple of parties for like the like game items like setting off on like multiple number of boats and in like the boat in which like Janko would be like traveling would be like that very same boat of like the picture and in that boat like I'm doing along with the Janko like that police chief as well will be traveling along with the Janko. It's like the scenario that I'm looking so that I'm looking maybe like the police chief to like take that temporary leave and I was like uh, for like just a few days and I was like and I was like that would be what like the condition that like the chief would be even telling them for that like the chief would be taking leave for like just a few days, one or two or 3 days alone like and within those 3 days if like Janko can find like any sort of evidence connecting to like experience or like to the island, then like the police will be straight away alerting like the remaining officers and they will be like able or be helping Janko see that outcome that I'm referring the police chief will be making and that way like I'm referring like most likely I'm referring definitely within that 3 days like I'm referring like eventually it's being specifically the search field of like in which like Django and like the police chief will be like I'm referring them itself like I'm referring like ending up constantly and out of sheer like finding like the precise DML and like the scenario that I'm referring and I'm referring definitely during that whole infiltration I'm referring like even though the police chief would be adapting like very many of the like I'm different like skill different like Janko maybe deciding and different like still Janko maybe deciding to like okay ahead by the time like the because like Janko at that point would be totally feeling not absolutely confident or confident that like Janko at that point would get that like to like straight away make it move before like the entire the police force would be showing up because like Janko would be worried of like the possibility of like the good game uh because like as each game like take place like with like Janko being aware of like how many like of like those innocent Squid Game candidates will be ending up that like so like I'm like Janko due to that whole feeling that pressure and I'm to relax Jumbo decided to like go ahead and make it to like infiltration even before like the remaining points of the would be able to like make it so like but like yeah like because of the situation would be like the remaining officers like deciding to get ready to like show up to that location where like they would have sent to like the remaining officers like Jumbo was totally feeling confident or like or confident and with that like Jumbo totally uh, like infiltrating ahead into like deciding to like infiltrate ahead into like that would be buildings and about the time that the like the police team from the police will be like totally feeling worried for like Jumbo that like he's totally deciding to like go along with like Jumbo ahead even before like the remaining police officer will be making it to that challenge. So like I'm doing like during their forced infiltration into like the game building and like eventually like the police chief ending up dying just like the scenario that I'm doing. Maybe like the police chief ending up dying trying to like protect Jumbo. It's like genuine scenario that I'm just about to break and bring. So like the plane on the pre-understand right now for like the old boardman front of like John Hope right now like not reading in like the forecaster in like the weather forecasters like the plane on pre-understand right now definitely for like the forecaster ending up being right and like that boardman ended up being wrong and everyone like on like the very next day of like their stuff for like John Hope even while there are things or things like like the the first team and definitely putting in like so in like the first team of like Janko but like Mr. Joy as well as like the police team along with like the boardman definitely would be all in that first team of like first team number one would be like the first team of Janko in which all these people will be there and there will be like also like a bunch of some men as well that like Mr. Joy as what I gathered is definitely going to mention. So that first team one is what I'm also think would be like I'm looking like they as they will be searching for like the Squid Game Island like I'm looking like the very next day as they will be searching for like the Squid Game Island I'm looking like definitely the a storm happening like the scenario that I'm looking and even with like the Portland like experience like I'm looking like this like prediction I think I'm being wrong and like they're being like too storm and like the forecast itself being right and their prediction being right and they're being like too storm and like the boat getting caught in that storm and like the boat capsizing, like the scenario that I'm bring and definitely that resulting in like I'm like that resulting in like those guilt meant that like the joy would have brought and would be present in that boat like them while the boat would be capturing them ending up drowning is like the scenario that I'm like it would be like an extremely dangerous and heavy storm and was with like picturing the range of waves and everything. So like I'm saying solely due to like sheer like I'm like it would be Janho as well as like the police chief as well as like Mr. Joy. That definitely nothing would be like surviving by them like totally watching a show, then getting taken by the waves, but like still totally by fear like them ending up watching a show in like some island and that island would be like Free Game Island. So like I'm looking among like the ones that would be surviving, I'm looking like there would be like Mr. Joy and there would be Junko as well as like the police chief as well as like I'm looking maybe for like that Portman as well, possibly surviving and watching a show on this like mysterious island and that would be like this game island, this like the scenario that I'm looking. So like I'm looking like by the time they will be using the and then the different like Janko totally telling that but and like the board and the different like the boardman board like totally getting thoroughly destroyed in that like extremely dangerous storm. It's like the scenario that I'm doing. So like I'm looking like still I'm looking like Janko solely genuinely would be concerned about like the boardman's safety. So like I'm looking Janko totally telling the boardman should like stay hidden somewhere in like the shorelines of that island while Amazon like Janko, it's only Janko Joy as well as like the police chief that will be making their infiltration into like this to game building. It's like the scenario that Amazon is offering. And but by the time they would be making their infiltration into like the game building, like the third good game would be going on. It's like the scenario that I'm looking for. The third or like the fourth game would be like during that would be going on. Like the scenario that I'm looking for. So like this is like the scenario that I'm remembering, and I'm remembering even though that Janko would have would be like the boardman to like stay hidden in like that island like I'm like the boardman eventually being worried for like Janko that like I'm like eventually like the boardman as well like only eventually after like Janko and the others would have simply infiltrated into like the game building like I'm maybe like the boardman eventually ending up finding its way into like Squid betting and still infiltrating into like things, namely in that way like infiltrating into like the Squid betting in hopes of like being able to like help Jang-ho because like the Botman will have that bond with like Jang-ho and that bond of friendship with Jang-ho and like he will do worried for example to see so like I mean that way like the Botman infiltrating into like the city building and like I was like him totally ending up dying by one of the by the hands of the noises the Indian of like an scenario that I'm going to bring and definitely I think like in the case of like the police chief I'm looking like him totally dying while trying to like protect Jang-ho is like an against scenario that I'm going to bring. But like I'm definitely protect Mr. Choi as well as Jang-ho right now was bring would be most likely surviving is that their infiltration in like the genuine for Skillian as well. Like they will be only surviving and escaping from like the Skillian building eventually. But like I'm different like even then and I'm different definitely the 2024 Skillian eventually would be stopped towards while like the Skillians would be going on as like in the scenario that I said. And so still I'm like info still escaping and I'm like that and then that would be how like eventually like season three of like the studios indeed happening while where like in forward after like the escape would be like returning back to like take the revenge on like Sanji on like any good scenario that I'm going to bring out there. Was super like eventually in like according to my information eventually in like that infiltration of like the team of like Jang Ho Choi and like police like I was like eventually as like they were getting into like serious troubles like from within like the studio meeting like the scenario that I'm looking at and I'm looking like Jang Ho eventually Jang Ho and the Choi maybe like eventually ending up in like a getting cornered like kind of like a situation. But like I was like towards like the end of like the game but like I was like it would be maybe at that point that I'm looking like even before that, like the police, even before like the police chief stuff, like I'm like he would have totally alerted, like might have totally got evidence and might have sent like pictures, and that way like might have totally got evidence to like the remaining police team, and that way like the police team would be like on their way. So like I'm like yeah, like I'm they would be continuing with the the police chief and like some point of some would be like by themselves would be like infiltrating and would be trying to like slow their path like because like Jumbo would be able to like waste time because like the peace begin like to like Jumbo knows of like all those great and proceeding and it ending up dying with this William and everything. So definitely like during that inspiration like jump on joy of definitely everything like eventually ending up into like a corner like kind of like a situation by like the Korean workers or like by the officer and all that is like the scenario that I'm looking at. But like at that point is when I was running like either it would be like the army of like the police forces that would be storming in into like the stadium buildings that would be like that would be like the sole manner through which like Junho Joy would be surviving. That's it as honor situation. Or like the other possibility that I was bringing for like maybe at that point to being when like the team B of like the team to like that would be going to like either both through like the team to like find like William Island like that team B by then would have found made it to like the William Island and would have found like the William Island and by then would be like infiltrating into like the civilian building. So that way, like by then, as like Jang Won so you'll be getting cornered, like I'm doing like the these officers, like they believe them might have totally survived like the storm without taking any, without losing any members of like the scenario that I'm that way, like the killed members of like the team be like all of them like showing up, and that way, like that resulting in like being like the soul factoring, like basically like even from like that corner situation, like Jumbo as well as like Mr. Choice surviving, like also like an eventual scenario of like another positive that I'm controlling for another thing. So that if you remember story I'm present right now as for like the remote possibility that I'm talking about like that both man friend of like Jumbo with whom like Jumbo had like translated desperately searched for like the Squid Island for like the past 2 or 3 years that Portman and that it made of like a particular that like that Portman doing that absolute trade of only like stealthily working for info and like the Squid just like the remote possibility that I'm talking because like that basically even during like the 2026 games like there was that for organ trading and everything. So back then like they were waiting for this like Portman to then transport organization maybe that boatman might have been this exact boatman. There's lack of possibilities that are perfect. So like my first impression is that back then during like the 2020 games, like precisely the fact that like Info had basically used this weapon on Janko in such a manner to ensure that like Janko doesn't die. It's certainly what might have happened is that when the Info the way Info used that weapon back then on Janko might have been definitely through such a with such a conscious intent to that with the hopes of like having the tank of jump or stuff, right? Because like when they deep down within Info, he will be definitely even though Info by then would have only realized that he would be well aware that jump is not it's like actual blood like Info, but like still emphasizing activity that brotherly emotion totally might have resulted in that Info wanting to like save Junko and that might be especially for that reason that like exactly like uh, maybe because of that reason that like Info might have used this weapon on Janho in such a way to like ensure that Janho doesn't die. It certainly might finish. And on top of doing that, like what Info might have done next might have been like after like Janho had basing that can have gone from like the clip. Like I'm looking like what Info might have straight away done might have been like Info might have straight away uh, uh, might have straight away left with like his like remains game of just but then again, also black jump hope has certainly like after that falling from it. But like in whole bit only hoping on to that the possibility of that jump hope being able to like survive situations like jump hope have all that body training and everything like the body just that jump hope surviving would be one thing that Info would be totally betting on and hoping for and Info might have been desperate to like save jump hope back then, especially when it was so like what Info might have done back then might have been that Info that might have run back to like the from that island to back to like the game island and at that point like I'm talking like Info might have quickly that Info might have had like the number to get the specific boatman and stuff new the point. So like it might have been maybe according to like Info holding like this boatman and Info ordering this boatman to like go to this specific island and definitely Info might have known like even back then Info might have known like all the locations that near to that's the game island. So like Info might have known like the precise name and like the location of that exact hidden whose like click from his selection had fallen. Certainly on the places. So like and looking like Info might have given that location coordinates and everything to that boardman and that way like to save Jung Ho like his brother Jung Ho might have done that and that way like the boardman might have found that Jung Ho like in the shorelines in that island. So like another thing what might have happened would be like Jumbo after like falling from like that cliff that Jumbo might have somehow struggled his way into that being able to like watch ashore on that very island of like what might have happened. So like I'm looking like the boatman might have at that point itself like the boatman might have that constantly been nearby as well. So like the to that island as well. So like the boatman might have straight away found Jumbo ashore like not in an unconscious kind of state. And in that way, like subordinate might have gone to like inform orders might have been how that subordinate might have failed. Young host depending on the tradition. According to like the order given by in host to that subordinate like and like info might have also told like the subordinate to like form this like absolute friendship with like Jumbo at any way possible. So like so that like info to like keep up to date as to like each and every single move that like Jumbo will be making after like Jumbo eventually recording to find and capture info would be along the lines like info might have back then itself like planned ahead. Definitely what might have happened in the event of the image. So like I'm wondering that way like this might be the first reason for like might be like the first reason for like Jumbo having the brilliant frantically search for to find like this game island for like the past 3 or 4 years and basically 2 or 3 or 4 years and still that's the fact that like Janko was able to find like this game and even though there are like a great number of islands around that area still that the fact that Janko was not able to find this game island after that constantly suffering for like the past 2 or 3 years it might have been solely due to that the boatman stepping in with because of like that secret allegiance that the government might be having towards like when the government might be secretly working and secretly and still be working for like the Squid Games and everything, especially what might have be like the actual case is also like a possibility that I'm looking at. So like I'm looking at what might have also happened might have been that once like Jumbo after like like the end of like the 2 years like once like Jumbo eventually had told like the boss and that basically Jumbo's going to like stop like this like so early stuff to like find like studio man, and then after like that like looking like think like the boardman wasn't able to like make any contact with like John Paul, but even like like the boardman like still loyally working for like in for like that boardman might have decided to like just like since like John Paul was something like the boardman might have decided to like ensure that basically it's like John Paul was up to anything, or like I'm believing maybe it might have been according to like the owners of like info maybe like I'm looking like after a while like the boatman might have phone Junko, and I'm going to bring like and the boatman might have casually phoned and talked to like Junko and asking that if like Junko wants to like meet up with him and basically once again for and for that to game and everything. So like I'm looking like it might be at that point that I'm looking for like maybe like I'm looking for like that phone call from like the boatman to Jungho might have even happened after like the death of like the Rakuji guy. It's also like a possibility that I'm looking for. So maybe after the death of the Rakuji guy and after like Info found out about like the Rakuji guy having died. Like basically at that point maybe according to like Info or stealthy orders like I'm believing like the boatman might have phoned Jungho and casually put on a fake act and might have asked Jungho if like he wants to as like he wants to meet up with like if Jungho wants to meet up with him and once again to go search for like this to game island again. But like I'm wondering that might have been like an absolute fake act of the tricky attempt by like the boardman to like get the proof of like out of that Jumpo as to like what Jumpo might be planning right now. And it's also like about that emergency. So like it might be during that time of like Jumpo that absolute full trust that like the innocent Jumpo might have had towards like the boardman that might have been to Jumpo that then might be that when that Jumpo that might have revealed to like the boardman about like that like that they have like another way to like capture like the catch up like the people behind like the games and that like basically like about like the tracking location teach strategy of Sanjon maybe like Janko that then might have revealed to like the board and that this like also like about the data and those things. I feel like this might be how like in-ho was like so easily able to like like trick like Sanjon as well as like Janko and all of them all of the like ultimate tracking location feed strategy that the fact that in-ho was like easily able to like outsmart the might have been maybe due to like this critical information that you're into it, crucial information passed to that info by like the boatman. Might be like the case, certainly might be what might have happened. It's also like a kind of like a possibility, another possibility that I'm just about to and my person. So like that's the case, then now it's going like the boatman would be like that ultimate trailer and like the ultimate that the prayer of like villainous person that was in like stealthy added to like a point with this developing for like significant info definitely also made the prevention. But like I'm doing right now with like the current situation being that basically that Janho having taken the decision to like not have just a single first party but to have like two first party. Like so, especially because of that, like I was like the boardman won't be able to like in a scenario like the boardman not being able to like trick like Janko again. But like in the case of like the second search part, because like I'm looking like the boardman and everything will be like straight away usually hired by hired by his choice mechanism. So like the boardman won't be able to like take advantage of it like friendship with like Jumpo to like once again for like Jumpo as well. It's like the scenario that I'm putting that way like but like there being two such teams for like this game island right now. So like this maybe for like scenario to be like the second search team eventually ending up finding like the game island. It's also like the possibility that I'm looking. But like I'm sure maybe like them getting caught in like the storm and basically that way like them losing a lot of their skilled fighters and people, men, and get the comparison that there being only like a few of them that will be surviving, and maybe that their boat might capture and they might watch a show in like the Studian Island might have been might be what might usually happen. It's also like about that episode, but like at that point, like they would be literally having their phones with them, but I don't think like once they watching it on that day and that temperature maybe let them phoning and luckily for them that the phone would be like still working or like it would be like a waterproof kind of like a phone. So like I'm looking with that, like I'm looking with them totally contacting lab calling and contacting that Junko is like a possibility that I'm looking for. Like, so like them formally calling it contacting Jumbo and like revealing to like Jumbo that like they have found like the Squid Game Island. So it's like possibility that I'm looking for. So like at that point, like I was on like Jumbo and Mrs. Joy and all of them would be like totally like feeling so would be totally joyful and excited and would be so simply hopeful that finally now they could like bring down like the people and like stadium and put an end to like stadium would be along the line stage thing. But like at that point, I was like might be like during that point like they might be during the search for like Stadium Island in for like the team of like the both men as well as John Hall and Mrs. Joy all from like they might have been while John Hall were seeing that fall on the like they might be searching through an island. It's like another island is left within another island. So like the boatman would be also uh, uh, would be also nearby while John Ho were seeing that fall. So like at that point like I'm looking like the boatman John Ho like telling like the boatman like I'm looking for like the boatman somehow at that point like totally pulling on fake act and basically as if like there's some sort of like an issue with like the boat or something and that way like I'm some sort some way like I'm from like that boatman like totally tricking John Ho and like the boatman totally putting on a fake address like fixing that boat and basically while so like I'm looking like into Jumbo because think it has been like I'm looking like Jumbo would be telling that boatman like quickly as soon as we will fix the boat and like Jumbo and was Joy and the other would be like waiting somewhere in that island. And during this time, like I'm looking at that boatman like totally taking advantage of the situation to like take totally leave with this like boat all by himself. And that way like Jumbo must Joy and like the remaining men armed men in the team that getting stranded on that island. It's like kind of the scenario that that way realistically the boatman once again like betraying all of them and breaking all of them and like leaving with his boat. And like at that point I'm looking for like the scenario to be like even though Jung-ho would have by then got like the tracking the location would might by then like would have sent by like the team B of like Jung-ho that might have what so on like this game island and made to like this game island with the on like they might have by then like send like the tracking the location of like the Squid Game Island to John Hope and John Hope's team of Mitch Joy and like those of them. But like I'm looking like the that they won't be having like the ghost to be able to like make it to like the Squid Game Island even though they would be knowing like the location of this game island is like the scenario that I'm looking. So like I'm looking like that way I'm looking like John Hope totally phoning like the police chief maybe once again so like I'm saying maybe like also like about the that the police chief of the like the police is not coming with that ending up coming along with like John Paul like sort of William Island so the river is there and so like I'm maybe while John Ho and also would be stranded there while knowing the location of William Island yet like not having a boat to let go up there like I'm looking at that point like I'm looking maybe like John Ho that as well desperation that calling like the police chief and desperately begging like the police chief to like really for with like the forces point with like the police forces to that place like I'm looking like Jack was setting that location to like the police chief and like telling like I'm the maybe the Django telling like the police chief and that would Ring police force to like I just to like the island where like Django and his joy and also will be trapped in and for them all to like go up to like the location of the game island or like I'm looking then possibilities for Django to like send back to the location to like the police chief and like the to basically go up to that location that like Jamho has sent like and even then I'm going to go to see like arguing with Jamho about like the lack of evidence and all that. So like at that point like I'm looking Jamho that's really begging to like the police to like listen to him. So like I'm looking that desperation from Jamho initially resulting in like the police chief feeling a lot of sympathy towards Jamho. So like I'm looking maybe like the police chief deciding to like uh, through by getting a boat like I'm looking that the police chief all by himself maybe deciding to that go up to that exact island where like jump over to traffic is like the scenario that I'm looking. So like maybe that scenario then by then like I'm looking like a lot of students would be like over, even like the first student probably being over. So like I'm looking maybe by the time like student would be taking place, might be like the by then that I'm looking for like the police chief with another boat like making it to that island were like jump out and install with Rabin Alexa Mall, like getting on that boat and going up to that location of the stadium island. And by the time they will be infiltrating into that the stadium building that there's different like purposes to game will be going on. It's like this much is like an eventual possible another possible scenario that I'm going to be referring another range. another prediction right now is that one among the civilian workers wearing like the black uniform, that the officer like a civilian worker like only having just like the agreement with like new and like I'm delivering like things like this like so thing that officer like so extremely greedy to like make money like I'm delivering like definitely like the officers like I'm delivering like that might be only two officers and I'm delivering those two officers might be like the closest also the friends of like in-house definitely my friends and but like I'm delivering definitely this is like the current situation of info is like basically info that playing as like a civilian candidate and then basically since like in like the past like while Ilnam was alive it was only Inho alone that had access to like Ilnam back then yet like since like currently like the present like the situation is like totally different than like Inho but like all these like officers having that absolute access to info and with like Ilnam's that like since like back then like, Ilnam was like the owner and in charge of like the entirety of the incident was like the owner of all that money that Ilnam had, like basically all belonged to that Ilnam. Luckily, Ilnam might have, it would be exactly because of that reason that like Ilnam might have decided to like have only his son, definitely still remember that like info definitely Ilnam's son. So that might be because of the reason for like Ilnam might have probably foreseen like possibility of that basically any of like the civilian workers at like any point like turning against like Ilnam might have not trusted any of the game or the selection possibility of any of the good job workers that who are like turning against Ilnam and trying to take Ilnam's like to totally steal Ilnam's like wealth. Like basically Ilnam might have had made such a fear and that might be the reason for like Ilnam strictly like only communicating with like Info alone back while Ilnam was alive. So definitely not the name because so Info alone having access to that Ilnam might have been the sort of reasons that we were but like since right now in the question like the case of Info like things are totally different but like after that Ilnam that's like I'm definitely Info that will be like in charge of everything and like might have inherited all that wealth of that Ilnam as well. It's definitely very friendly. So like since like the current situation is basically it's like one of like the officer of like info the front man like already being revealed to be like an extremely greedy person. And with like his like current situation, like his big disagreement with like Neol and everything, which is like current like organ trading thing, like not going as expected for him like Amber Nexus or eventually Amber spiraling into like eventually resulting into like that officer's greed eventually ending up with like him because like he would be then fully aware that like about info that info is like the frontman and that like info is like the inheritor of all the threats and that like that very same info is right now playing like the Squid games like as like a Squid game candidate like that officer will be well fully aware. So like I'm looking like it should be still that officer. I'm looking like those two officers. One of the center would be only two officers and with like the black Squid game outfit the first game of which is the new so like I'm looking them both eventually deciding to like betray info. It's like a scenario that I'm looking at them both deciding to like eventually deciding to like betray info and take info's life eventually uh, that way so that like they could like totally inherit like and take away all that wealth belongs to info and so that like they could be in charge of the same that it was the game and they could that way conduct like the game exactly according to like their pleasing and so as to like make even more money than like the game currently is like making through info. And with such an eventual betrayal as well totally happening again like info by the officers eventually in like the future of like literally in the past to gain like kind of scenario that I'm about to play and definitely I'm going to like even in like the 2020 to gain like while Ilnam had played like the fourth game as like a game candidate like I'm going back then like and that's the thing that I was mentioned like the old man with dementia that had played like the first three games along with like Sanjay might have been actually Sanjay's father and Ilnam would definitely be that that old man with dementia like twin product is definitely one of those. So like I'm looking at back then when Ilnam had basically played that fourth skill game in like 2020 of like the map game like back then like I'm looking like none of the game of the set for that was like very impressive that back then when Ilnam had played as like a game candidate in like the fourth game like I'm looking back then like I'm looking it might have been in alone who might definitely be like some Ilnam might be like the only person only game worker that might have know that like Innam is like the in charge of like the entire PFX game and still running like the entire PFX game. It's definitely very present. When it comes to like all the remaining game workers back then, like I'm going like from their point of view, like they might have probably been seeing that like they might have none of them might like to like the identity of like the person running like the entire PFX game. It's definitely very present. So like even while those game workers like Innam was playing like the first game in front of like all those game workers while Vietnam played like the master studio with example, like none of those studio workers might be aware that like that very same Vietnam is like the in charge of like the entire village to gamers, the film and everything. So like and also from like so like basically even while towards like the end of like the fourth game while Vietnam even after like regardless of purposefully like after like Vietnam losing to like Sangam, still like the fact that like Vietnam was saved like and everything like that might have been solely according to like the orders of like info like the frontman back then Stephanie member. So like and like the Indian workers wearing like the red uniform that they might have like according to like the rules they might have absolutely no right to like question any orders from like from Manchester Indian workers. So like from them might have given them the orders that basically even though to do this unfair thing while even while like that's the game candidate like in had basically lost against like Sangyo and still to like do not take his life. We do not eliminate his life when like info might have as like the commander given that order to like this game was like and within they might have straight away agree it might have been what might have happened if even then might be in like the same situation where people represent that like this might be that might have been like the same case in like the games as well while in that game alone was able to like form up there like the before that once to game in 2020 like with that woman alone like that single woman alone not being able to like form a team and yet like the fact that she wasn't eliminated solely because of that like might also been solely according to like the order of that in-house like the front man to like the stadium workers like they might have not eliminated her. It's definitely my point. So like the stadium workers might have like a for like, the role they might have you know right to like question like the orders of like the front man stadium workers. So like this might have been what might have happened in like 2020 is definitely might be prevalent. But right now, things like in like the person like but the thing definitely like in the case of the school game workers, I'm still thinking about the like the school game workers like the majority of like the community members are like in like the percent in that that is in the report school games like I'm looking like almost like the entirety of like the school game workers in like the red uniform might not be aware of like who info is that basically that's the game candidate, that number one game candidate info is like basically the in charge of like the entire and like the person currently running like the entire game. Like this will be one thing that I'm looking for in like maybe none of like the skill game workers will be aware of except for like those two officer skill game workers alone. And I'm looking like them totally using like the current situation of like info playing as like a skill game candidate to their advantage to like basically to get rid of like info due to their extreme period like them trying to like get rid initially trying to like get rid of black info so that like they could like encourage like all of that info spread as well as like run like the stadium according to that the reason. It's like an eventual scenario. So like such an eventual future of betrayal in like the for Indian by the officers against like info is what I'm going to delivering and another everything. Yet like I'm just containing more just about that even through such a betrayal and such an attempt to like get rid of info on the but still info totally surviving and maybe like I'm maybe like Sanjon might be a factor in like info during that point being able to like, survive. It's also like about the veteran too. Not only Sanjon, maybe like Jamha as well. By then would have infiltrated with his team into like this community and that way like I was like maybe due to their collective effort maybe in home that way. Even while in home they getting betrayed and basically the like the studio was trying to get rid of black in home. But still maybe due to like Sanjon and like Jamha collective effort, like maybe then saving, even saving like in focus, like an eventual possible scenario as well that I'm going to bring and answering. My personal impressions are like if that ends up becoming like the eventual scenario, then my personal impressions that like then the eventual scenario that I'm going to bring is that basically like as for like the season three, that which would be like the dedicated place to game like that's the games and that would be run by so those two officers like the scenario that I'm referring, or like so the possibility that I'm referring that like maybe among those two officers like after like info and all of them would be like escaping like and that officers would be escaping like and like still that them totally somehow them managing to like steal info's wealth and then like it could be that one among those officers may be that taking the life of like the betraying the other officer and taking the life of the other officer, and that single officer like basically stealing all of the info and running like the Squid Games in like 2025. It's like also like a remote officer that I'm doing, or like the other officer that I'm for like those two officers like basically running like the Squid Games in like 2025. Just like also like a officer that I'm doing. So like that way maybe like trying to re-entering in like the games in like 2025. Maybe like In-ho as well. Maybe like re-entering back into like this game in like 2025. Maybe he like stop with the intent to like stop and bring down those two that those two officers to be and workers would be like around in the game. Those are kind of like a remote possibility that I'm considering and I'm training.